Iris was getting ready for work, preparing to clean an apartment. She didn't know the person who lived there would be home, let alone that he'd ask her to join him and his old school friends for a get-together. Little did Iris know, there was more to this invitation than just a friendly gathering. It turned out to be full of unexpected surprises and secrets. Iris was a determined young woman who found a special way to help her family. She worked hard cleaning houses, mostly getting new clients from happy customers who told their friends about her. Iris had faced challenges early on, like becoming a mom when she was young, which caused problems with her parents. But with her daughter Camille by her side, Iris felt inspired to make things better. When Camille was just 6 months old, Iris decided to take charge of her life. Since it was tough to find a regular job while taking care of her daughter, Iris started cleaning houses instead. She quickly got more clients because she did great work and was always dedicated. The best part was that cleaning gave Iris the flexibility to take care of Camille while still earning a living and making a good life for them both. Another day started, and Iris got ready for another round of tough work. Today, she was set to clean an apartment. It was her first time working there. Usually, her clients trusted her so much they'd let her in or leave the key for her. They were all super busy, often busy with work all day. So Iris hardly ever got to meet her clients face to face. But because they trusted her so much, she could work quietly, keeping their places clean and tidy while they stayed busy with their schedules. Iris started her day by checking on her adorable 4-year-old daughter, Camille, before getting ready for work. The plan was to take Camille to school and then head to the apartment for her cleaning job. But there was a problem. Camille wasn't feeling well. She had a fever and was coughing now and then. Luckily, Iris had medicine ready for situations like this. It was obvious that Camille wouldn't be able to go to school that day. But Iris, being both a loving mom and a dedicated worker, couldn't ignore her duties for the day. She took special care of Camille, giving her the medicine she needed to feel better. Then, faced with a tough choice, Iris made a decision. In this unusual situation, she chose to bring Camille with her to work. It was something she hadn't done before, but under the circumstances, it was the only way to make sure she fulfilled her promise to her client. When Iris reached the apartment, she realized the key wasn't where it was supposed to be, so she rang the doorbell instead. Much to her surprise, a friendly young man answered the door. "You must be Iris," he said with a smile. "I'm Nathan. I had to work from home today, but go ahead with the cleaning as planned." "Good morning, Mr. Nathan. I didn't think you'd be home. I hope it's okay, but I had to bring my daughter with me. I promise you won't be a bother," Iris apologized, feeling a bit awkward. Nathan, with a friendly smile, responded, "Oh, please just call me Nathan, and don't worry about your daughter. Feel free to put on a movie for her on the TV if you'd like." Nathan's kindness and understanding really impressed Iris. She made sure to work quietly and carefully that morning, knowing Nathan was busy with his own tasks. As lunchtime approached and Iris was still cleaning, Nathan emerged from his room. "Iris, I'm about to have lunch. Would you and your daughter like to join me?" he offered. Iris was surprised by the kindness Nathan showed her, but she didn't want to overstay her welcome. After all, he had already been so understanding about her daughter being there. "Thank you very much, Nathan," she said gratefully, "but I'm almost finished, and then I need to get home so my daughter can rest." Nathan insisted, smiling. "I've already told you, no need for Mr. I'm not that old." "Okay then. I hope your daughter feels better soon. Thanks for your hard work, and here's your payment." Meeting Nathan had a big impact on Iris. She was used to clients who kept their distance, so Nathan treating her with kindness and equality really touched her. This meant a lot, especially considering the challenges she had faced in life. Before Iris met Nathan, she had crossed paths with Camille's father, Victor, at a party. She was young and out to have a good time with her friends. Victor, a bit older and charming, caught Iris's eye. They spent some time together, but Victor never wanted anything serious. While Iris was falling for him, Victor kept his distance and avoided getting involved with her family. He never introduced Iris to his family, and when he learned about the pregnancy, he disappeared without a word. With little information about him, Iris found herself alone, facing the unexpected pregnancy and an uncertain future. Despite initial conflict with her parents about Camille's pregnancy, Iris had their support throughout. When Camille was born, family and friends came together, providing clothes and diapers for the baby. This show of solidarity helped Iris through a tough time with the support of her family and friends. She gradually found her strength and worked towards a better future for herself and her daughter. Although she faced challenges, Iris had to set aside her dream of becoming a nurse. Motherhood and supporting her daughter left her with no time or resources to pursue her studies. It had been a week since Iris last cleaned Nathan's apartment, the friendly customer who had pleasantly surprised her with his kindness. Then, she got a message from him asking for another cleaning the next day. This time, the keys were right where they were supposed to be, which oddly left Iris feeling a bit disappointed. Maybe, deep down, she hoped to see that young man again. As Iris entered the apartment, she quickly noticed a surprise waiting for her. A neatly wrapped gift sat on the table, accompanied by a note that read, "Iris, this is for your daughter. I hope she enjoys it." After completing the cleaning, Iris headed to pick up her daughter from school, clutching the gift tightly. When Camille received it, her eyes lit up with joy, warming Iris's heart. Nathan's simple gesture of kindness made Iris think about how different things could have been if Camille had a loving father like him, instead of Victor's absence. The next week, Iris went to clean Nathan's apartment once more, and to her surprise, he was home this time. He greeted her with a warm smile as he opened the door. "Hey, Iris, I'm working from home today, so no worries about interrupting," he said. Iris smiled back. "Oh, you're not bothering at all. This is your place after all." Throughout the day, as Iris cleaned, she and Nathan chatted like old friends. They talked about everyday things, shared stories and experiences, creating a genuine sense of friendship. When Iris finished, she said goodbye, thanking Nathan once again for the gift he had given to her daughter. Over the next few weeks, Iris continued her weekly cleaning visits to Nathan's home. Sometimes he was there, other times he wasn't. Nathan, being a bit older and a lawyer, would occasionally talk about his work cases, while Iris shared bits of her own life story. One day, as she worked, Nathan mentioned he had a meeting planned with his old high school buddies. He confessed he wasn't really looking forward to it, but felt obligated to go since it had been a while since they last met. What caught Iris off guard was what he said next. "In high school, I used to joke about never settling down or having kids. I was the designated bachelor of the group," Nathan explained, reminiscing. "Wouldn't it be a laugh if I showed up there married?" Suddenly struck by an idea, Nathan turned to Iris. "Hey, Iris, would you be up for going with me to this meetup, pretending to be my wife?" Though the request caught her off guard, Iris saw the potential for some fun. With Nathan arranging a babysitter for Camille, they both dressed up and headed to the gathering. Iris couldn't remember the last time she had dolled up and put on so much makeup. Having a break from her usual routine felt like a breath of fresh air. When they arrived at the meetup spot, Iris felt Nathan's hand in hers, and he said with a playful grin, "If we're going to play the part, we might as well do it right." It was a lighthearted moment that made her smile as they walked in holding hands. Nathan's friends were genuinely surprised when he introduced Iris as his wife. They teased her, jokingly asking how she managed to tie down the confirmed bachelor. The evening had a relaxed and enjoyable vibe, and everyone seemed to be having a great time. As the night wore on, it became harder to tell if Iris and Nathan were just putting on an act or if there was something more between them. They continued to hold hands, sharing meaningful glances and enjoying lively conversations with Nathan's friends. The boundary between play acting and reality seemed to blur, fostering a genuine sense of closeness between them. The relaxed atmosphere took a sudden turn when Nathan's late friend arrived. Iris's expression turned pale instantly. She gripped Nathan's arm, her voice filled with concern. "Remember when I told you about Camille's father disappearing?" "That's him," she whispered urgently. Nathan's eyes widened as he followed her gaze. "But that's my old friend Victor," he exclaimed. "He's the one who left you?" Iris asked, disbelief in her voice. Nathan didn't hesitate to leave, and Iris readily agreed. As they made their way out, they ran into Victor. Seeing Nathan with Iris, Victor recognized her despite the years that had passed. In a disrespectful tone, he sneered, "Hey, Nathan. What's with you and this gold digger? Looks like she finally found someone to scam." Knowing Iris and her character, Nathan firmly defended her. "Victor, you'd have no right to insult Iris. She's hardworking and honest. Now, if you'll excuse us, we're leaving." With that, he walked away with Iris, leaving behind Victor's hurtful words. Nathan's protective stance strengthened their bond, showing his loyalty to Iris as a friend. Once they were in the car, emotions were more in check. Iris thanked Nathan for standing by her side during that tough moment. Victor has shown his true colors as a complete scoundrel who needs to face up to his responsibilities. I can assist you in making him acknowledge Camille as his daughter, Nathan offered. But Iris's response caught him off guard. I've often wondered what it would be like if Victor had stayed with me and been a father to Camille. But today, I realized I don't want that man in my life, let alone in my daughter's life. I've been working hard and managing to take care of her without his help. She doesn't need a father who rejected her. Nathan gazed at Iris with admiration and asked, "And what about me, Iris? Do you want me in your life?" "Yes, Nathan. I want you to be a part of my life," Iris replied, her smile radiant. Their lips met in a sweet, passionate kiss, marking the start of a new chapter for them. Their bond deepened as their relationship blossomed, and Nathan felt he had found someone to build a future with. Camille, Iris's daughter, grew to love him too, and their family bond grew stronger. Eventually, Iris and Nathan decided to marry, a moment of joy and fulfillment. It also meant Iris could pursue her dream of becoming a nurse. The tale of Iris, Nathan, and Camille carries a poignant message about leaving the past, embodied by Victor, behind. At times, those who should stand beside us fail to meet their obligations, causing hurt and disillusionment. Yet, it's crucial to understand that we aren't defined by the actions of those who've wronged us. Iris refused to let Victor's absence shape her and her daughter's future. Instead, she focused on crafting a nurturing and fulfilling life for Camille, with Nathan's unwavering support. If you enjoyed the story, please show your appreciation by liking and subscribing to the channel. Share your feedback by commenting with a number from 1 to 5 to indicate your level of satisfaction. Also, check out the video currently displayed on your screen. Until next time.
My name's Nora Thompson. Tonight, like most nights since arriving in Monte Carlo, I found myself sitting alone at a small cafe on the edge of the bustling casino square. It's a far cry from the luxurious life I was born into, but after graduating from a fancy college stateside, all I wanted was a simple break. My dad, he owns half the globe it seems, from hotels to tech firms. I use my mom's last name, though, to keep things real, to keep the vultures at bay. The night was cooling off when he walked in. Daniel looked like he owned the place, or at least like he thought he did. Swaggering over with a confidence that I guess comes from wearing a suit that costs more than most people's rent, he pulled out the chair opposite me without asking. "Mind if I sit?" he finally said after already sitting down. His smile was all charm, probably practiced. "Looks like you're already sitting," I replied, barely looking up from my coffee. He chuckled, the sound a bit too smooth. "I'm Daniel. And you are?" "Nora," I said curtly, giving him a quick once-over. Not my usual type, too polished, but admittedly, good-looking. "So, Nora, what brings a girl like you to a pricey haunt like this all by yourself?" His tone had a touch of a tease, and I wasn't sure if I was amused or annoyed. "Just enjoying my coffee," I answered, keeping it vague. "What's your excuse?" I could say business, but I'd be lying tonight. "Let's just say I'm scouting for something interesting, and looks like I might have found it," he said, his gaze steady on me. I raised an eyebrow. "Hope the coffee lives up to your expectations then." Daniel laughed. "Something tells me it's already exceeded them." I wasn't here to make friends, definitely not looking for a fling. "Look, I'm not one of those girls who fall for lines, if that's what you're aiming for. And I'm certainly not interested in whatever game you're playing." "Who says I'm playing a game?" he asked, his voice lowering slightly. "Experience," I replied. "You sit down, uninvited, start with a line, expect what? A phone number? A date?" He leaned back, looking genuinely amused now. "You're tough. I like that. Not looking for a number, just conversation. But if it's too much, say the word, and I'll vanish." I considered him for a moment. Monte Carlo was beautiful, but lonely. Maybe a little chat wouldn't hurt. Conversation is fine. But keep it light. We talked for a while, the conversation surprisingly easy. He didn't press for personal details, and I didn't offer any. As the night grew deeper, I realized that despite my initial reservations, I was actually enjoying the chat. Daniel wasn't like the typical guys who often tried to impress me with their wallets or connections. He had an air about him that suggested he was used to the finer things, but wasn't defined by them. Eventually, the evening cooled down, and it was time to go. "Well, Daniel, this was unexpectedly pleasant," I said as I stood to leave. "Surprised yourself, huh?" he asked with a grin. "Maybe just a bit. Good night, Daniel." As I walked back to my apartment, his words echoed slightly in my mind. Monte Carlo was indeed full of surprises, and perhaps, just perhaps, I'd stumbled upon one tonight. After that first encounter with Daniel, the nights in Monte Carlo seemed a bit less solitary. He had a knack for popping up wherever I was, whether I was checking out the local markets during the day or having a late dinner by myself. His persistence wasn't annoying, surprisingly, it was quite the opposite. Maybe because he wasn't pushy, he just seemed genuinely interested in being around me. One breezy evening, as I was watching the sun dip below the horizon, he walked over, 2 coffees in hand, and sat down beside me without a word. "Assuming I wanted coffee?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. He handed me a cup. "If I'm wrong, I'll drink both." "Good guess then," I said, accepting the coffee. We sat in silence for a bit, the sound of the waves filling the quiet moments. "You never told me what you do back in the States," Daniel finally broke the silence. "Didn't think it mattered," I shrugged. "I work. Right now, I'm just enjoying not working." "Fair enough," he chuckled. "Everyone's got a story, though. Don't you think?" Over the next few days, we fell into an easy routine. Daniel showed me parts of Monte Carlo I hadn't explored yet. We talked about everything and nothing, movies, books, our favorite foods. He loved to argue about the best James Bond actor, staunchly defending Daniel Craig, while I was all about the classics like Sean Connery. One day, as we were strolling along the beach, he stopped suddenly and looked at me seriously, a look I hadn't seen before. "Nora, I know I'm just some guy you met at a cafe, but these past weeks have been, I don't know, different. Better. Because of you." I stopped too, unsure how to respond. Feelings were not what I planned on dealing with here. "Daniel, I like hanging out with you, I do. But this is just a break for me. I'm not looking for complications." He nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. "I get it. No pressure. Just know that I'm here, okay? And I think you're pretty amazing." Days turned into weeks, and my time in Monte Carlo was drawing to a close. Daniel and I spent more and more time together, and what started as casual walks and talks turned into late-night dinners and early morning breakfasts. It was the last thing I expected, falling for someone under the Mediterranean stars. Then, one evening, he dropped a bombshell. "Come back with me, Nora. Work at my company in the States. I know it's sudden, but I don't know, I just think it could be great." The idea was crazy. Completely insane. And yet, part of me was tempted. Tempted by the adventure, by the idea of taking this whatever it was and seeing where it could go. Moving back to the States felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Daniel's offer wasn't just a job, it was an invitation into his life, and suddenly, I was living in an ordinary apartment in an ordinary part of town, playing the role of an ordinary girl who'd lucked out. My father, however, had different ideas about ordinary. He showed up unannounced one afternoon, just as I was unpacking my last box. His booming laugh filled my small living room as he stood in the doorway, towering and larger than life. "Nora. Hiding out in plain sight, huh?" He chuckled, giving me a big hug that almost crushed my ribs. "So, tell me about this decision. This guy must be something special for you to up and move like this." His tone was light, but I could tell he was probing, doing his fatherly duty, to sniff out any trouble. I sighed, sitting down on the couch. "His name's Daniel. He's different, Dad. He doesn't know about all this. I said, waving vaguely around, implying the wealth and the complicated strings that came with it. Dad sat down next to me, his expression serious now. Nora, you know you can't keep that a secret forever. If he's going to be part of your life, he should know who you are. I know, Dad. I want to be sure about him before I complicate things. Thanks for looking out for me, though. He ruffled my hair like he used to when I was a kid. Always, kiddo. Just remember, if you need anything, I'm just a call away. And I've got eyes everywhere, he added with a wink. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjusting to my new job and new life. Daniel was a constant presence, supportive and as charming as ever. But there was an edge to him now, a sort of sharpness that came with the responsibilities he carried. One night, over a quiet dinner at my place, Daniel brought up a topic I'd been dreading. Nora, when do you think I'll get to meet your parents? I feel like I'm missing a big part of your life. I paused, the weight of the moment settling over me. Well, my mom passed away a long time ago, and, my dad's just a regular trucker. We're not exactly on speaking terms right now. Daniel frowned, a hint of concern crossing his face. I'm sorry to hear that. But you know, whenever you're ready, I'd like to meet him. Family is important. I nodded, appreciating his sentiment but knowing full well the reality of my father's world, a world I wasn't ready to introduce Daniel to just yet. Life with Daniel moved at a pace I never expected. We were already blending our lives together, my job at his company was going great, and we were getting deeper into our relationship. I guess it all seemed like we were gearing up for something big, but I was still taken aback when that big moment actually happened. It was a normal evening, we were at his place, a cozy, upscale apartment with views of the city skyline. We'd just finished dinner, nothing fancy, just some takeout because neither of us felt like cooking. We were sitting on the couch, a documentary about ocean life playing in the background, the kind you watch but don't really watch. Daniel turned to me, his expression more serious than the situation called for. He took my hand, and suddenly, I felt my heart start to race. Nora, I've been thinking about us, about everything we've been through and everything I want for us in the future. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. Yeah? I love you, Nora. I love everything about you, and I don't want to imagine my life without you. He paused, and I could see him swallow hard, like he was nervous. That made two of us. I want to be with you, always. Will you marry me? Just like that. No getting down on one knee, no ring box being opened. It was straightforward, genuine, and so very Daniel. Yes, I said, the word coming out in a rush, almost a relief. Yes, I will. He grinned, that wide, infectious grin that had won me over from day one, and hugged me tight. We spent the rest of the evening talking about our future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves. It was exciting and a bit daunting, but it felt right. The next challenge came when I told my dad. I expected him to be happy, but his response was lukewarm at best. Nora, you know I want nothing but your happiness, but are you sure about this? It's all happening so fast, he said, his voice heavy with concern. I'm sure, Dad. He's a great guy. You'll see. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. He sighed. All right, but promise me you'll sign a prenup. Just to be safe. The word prenup didn't scare me, it was just another part of the modern marriage package, especially with someone who had as much to lose as I did, even if Daniel didn't know the full extent of it. Of course, Dad. We'll handle it, I assured him. That's good then. And Nora, I won't be at the wedding. I don't want to spoil your story about being a simple girl. Then came the introduction to Daniel's mother. Her reception was icy from the start. During dinner at their family home, she scrutinized me with a look that chilled the room. Daniel, are you sure about this girl? She doesn't seem like a fit for our family, she remarked bluntly. Daniel tried to smooth things over, but his mother was relentless. A prenuptial agreement is non-negotiable, she insisted. I agreed without hesitation, knowing it would ease some tension. Absolutely, I wouldn't have it any other way, I said as we later formalized the terms with a lawyer present. Despite these hurdles, our wedding in the Maldives was breathtaking. Standing beside Daniel, with the ocean whispering behind us and the sand beneath our feet, I felt a surge of hope. It was just us, our love, and a future we were ready to shape together, despite the rocky start with family expectations. Married life started off better than I could have hoped. Daniel and I settled into our new house, a beautiful place with more space than we'd ever need. It was supposed to be the beginning of our perfect life together. I threw myself back into work, determined to prove that I was more than just the boss's wife. My role at the company had always been challenging, but now there was an added layer of expectations. I was not only managing projects, but was also part of key decision-making processes. Daniel seemed proud, at least initially. He would introduce me in meetings with a hint of pride in his voice. "This is Nora, my wife and our project lead." However, as the months rolled on and the projects under my lead turned successful, bringing in significant profits and boosting the company's profile, something in Daniel shifted. It was subtle at first. A comment here, a slight remark there. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, he brought it up. "Nora, you're doing great at work." "Too great, maybe." I looked up from my plate, puzzled. "What do you mean, too great? Isn't that good for the company?" "It is," he admitted, pushing his food around on his plate. "But, you know, the guys are starting to say it's turning into Nora's show over there." His words stung a little. "Isn't that a bit unfair? I thought you'd be happy that we're doing well." "I am happy, but it's a lot, you know? Everyone's always talking about you, about how you handle things. Makes me wonder where I stand." That conversation was the first of many. As the business grew, so did the strain between us. Daniel's once supportive demeanor was now tinged with resentment. I couldn't understand it. Wasn't he the one who had encouraged me to step up in the first place? Things got worse when his mother came to stay with us for a few weeks. Her presence in the house brought an old-world, traditional attitude that I had always managed to avoid. She would make offhand comments about my work, about how a wife should be more present at home. "You're always at the office, Nora. When do you have time to take care of your husband?" she would say. I tried to shrug it off, to keep the peace, but her words only deepened the growing rift between Daniel and me. It seemed no amount of success at work could compensate for what was slowly unraveling at home. The more I achieved, the more our marriage suffered. One evening, Daniel came home from work, his face set in a grim line. "Nora, I think it's best if you leave the company. We need to focus on our family, and it seems like your role there it's just causing too much tension." "Leave the company? But why? I've been contributing so much." My voice was a mix of disbelief and anger. "It's for the best. You can focus on the house, maybe start that garden you've always talked about?" His tone was dismissive, as if he was deciding on something trivial, not my career. The next day, I found out he had let go of all our house staff, housekeepers, cooks, gardeners. It was all on me now. "You wanted to be more involved at home, here's your chance," he said, almost coldly. I wasn't scared of housework, but the way this was thrown at me felt wrong. This wasn't the loving, caring man I married, this was someone else, someone very intolerant and controlling. His mother, staying with us at the time, seemed to relish the situation. "It's good for a wife to focus on her home," she would say, smirking slightly whenever Daniel talked about my new role as a full-time housewife. As I adjusted to this unexpected turn in my life, I couldn't help but feel ashamed. Ashamed that I hadn't seen this coming, ashamed to admit to my father that maybe he was right about Daniel. When Daniel suggested a trip to Monte Carlo, to maybe light up what was left of our spark, I was hesitant but hopeful. That hope died quickly when his mother announced she'd join us. "It's been ages since I've traveled," she declared loudly as if it were a decree that couldn't be opposed. Daniel, of course, welcomed her with open arms, not once considering what I might think. We rented a small house in Monte Carlo, which was charming but costly, and it quickly became my prison rather than a retreat. From the start, Daniel and his mother treated the city as their playground. They rented luxurious cars, visited exclusive boutiques, and dined at the finest restaurants while I was left to manage the household. They demanded home-cooked meals, turning me into nothing more than a servant in a holiday home, cooking and cleaning after them as they gallivanted around the city. As days passed, Daniel's mother digs grew sharper, her tone more venomous. "Really, Nora, living at someone else's expense must be quite the life, huh?" She'd sneer, her words a slap disguised in a smirk. Daniel never defended me. Instead, he laughed. His laughter was a betrayal each time, echoing around the cold walls of our temporary home. I felt isolated, the city's sparkle muted by the shadow of their disdain. One evening, we passed a grand old-style hotel, its facade a reminder of a world of elegance and respect. Daniel's mother, her voice dripping with envy, remarked, "Lucky billionaire Harris. Imagine owning such a hotel, ruling over a palace like that." That night, at a restaurant overlooking the sea, the last vestige of my patience crumbled. As we sat down, she waved the waiter over with an imperious flick of her wrist. "For Nora, the cheapest dish will do. No need to spoil her with extravagances she doesn't deserve," she declared loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Daniel's response was a chuckle, his agreement coming not just from his mouth, but from the dismissive flip of his hand. "Good call, Mom. Let's not go overboard." Humiliation washed over me like the waves crashing on the rocks below us. Rising from my chair, the clatter of my seat echoing my turmoil, I faced them both, my voice steady, louder than I intended. "I will not tolerate this any longer," I declared, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. "I am divorcing you, Daniel." The cold air of Monte Carlo was nothing compared to the chill of betrayal as I walked away from the restaurant. Daniel and his mother, rather than coming to apologize, followed me out with insults. As I quickened my pace, my mother-in-law's voice rang out sharp and clear. "Just look at her, a beggar, unworthy of my son." My heart raced, but before I could get far, Daniel caught up and grabbed my purse from my shoulder, his fingers clenching it tightly. "This is my money, Nora. Go on, get out on all fours if you have to." His voice was laced with contempt as he yanked the purse away, leaving me stunned on the sidewalk. Beside him, his mother laughed cruelly, her eyes gleaming with malice. "Maybe now you'll learn to beg in Monte Carlo, since that's all you're good for." Their laughter echoed down the street as I stood there, walletless and alone. But as they hurled their final insults, fate stepped in. We were near that grand old hotel, the one Daniel's mother had earlier envied aloud, wishing she could own such a place. Pointing to the hotel, she sneered, "Maybe they'll let you in as a beggar." At that moment, the gates of the hotel opened, and a guard appeared. He saw me, recognition lighting up his face. "Miss Harris," he called out warmly, walking over with a respectful salute. The moment he said my name, the atmosphere shifted. Daniel and his mother paused, their expressions turning from satisfaction to confusion. The guard smiled broadly. "Your father told us you might come by. Please, this way. The best room is always reserved for you, as per Mr. Harris's instructions." Daniel's mother's face paled, her earlier words turning to ash in her mouth. "Harris? As in the billionaire Harris?" she stammered, her earlier bravado crumbling. Ignoring them both, I walked towards the guard, my posture straightening. "Thank you, Pierre," I said, my voice calm and collected. Inside, I felt a mix of relief and vindication. Behind me, Daniel's pleas began, his tone desperate. "Nora, please, I didn't mean." His mother, not to be outdone, shouted past her son, "Perhaps we could come in for a drink, at least?" I didn't look back. Entering the hotel, the doors closing behind me felt symbolic, shutting out the chaos of my old life. Pierre escorted me to the reception, where staff greeted me with the deference due to the daughter of their employer. The flight back to the United States was a long one, giving me plenty of time to ponder over my next steps. By the time I landed, my resolve had hardened like the city sidewalks, ready to be trodden upon, but unyielding to the pressure. The following day, I found myself in the office of a reputable lawyer, papers spread out before me like a battle map. During your tenure at the company, it appears your husband failed to pay you bonuses owed for the multi-million-dollar deals you closed, the lawyer pointed out, his tone a mix of surprise and indignation. That sounds about right, I sighed, my mind racing through the countless hours I'd poured into that company, the success I had driven. We're suing for $3 million. The courtroom was cold and sterile, a stark contrast to the heated glares Daniel shot across the room. As he stood there, fumbling through his defense, the man I once loved looked nothing short of pathetic. When the verdict came, a resounding victory awarding me $3 million, Daniel's face crumpled. Outside the courthouse, he attempted one last plea. Nora, everyone's laughing at me. I messed up. Can we start over? His words could have tugged at my heartstrings once, but that time had passed. You only miss the money, Daniel. Maybe listen less to your mother next time, I said, the edge in my voice cutting through the crisp air. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels against the pavement marking the end of that chapter. Returning home, I faced my father. The air between us was thick with unspoken words until I broke the silence. Dad, I should have listened to you. He wrapped me in a hug, his embrace warm and forgiving. You had to learn on your own. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. We talked late into the night, about life, mistakes, and new beginnings. His advice was a beacon as I navigated through my thoughts of the future. Inspired by our conversation, I began laying the groundwork for my next venture. My experience at Daniel's company had not only honed my skills, but ignited a passion for the industry I couldn't deny. I decided to open my own investment firm. With my expertise and the hefty settlement, I had the resources to start something meaningful, something mine. Weeks turned into months as I built my business from the ground up. The challenges were daunting, but every setback taught me a lesson, every success a confirmation that I was on the right path. Sitting in my new office, overlooking the bustling streets below, I realized how far I'd come. From a disillusioned wife in a loveless marriage to a competent business owner, the journey had been fraught with hurdles, but each one had made me stronger. Hey there, I'm Emma Clark. Born and raised in the small town of Harlow, nothing fancy, just a place where faces are familiar and secrets don't stay hidden for long. I made my way through college, diving straight into the world of retail after graduation. Lingerie wasn't just a product to me, it was a passion. I worked my tail off and eventually, I was the proud owner of a chain of lingerie stores that spanned from cozy little boutiques to swanky outlets. Work was my life, and I was good at it, damn good. But you know how it goes, after stacking up those hours, days, and months into a neat pile of success, I started feeling like there was something missing. That's when Michael came into the picture. It was just a ping on my phone at first, a friend request from a guy with a sharp suit and sharper eyes, judging from his profile picture. I didn't know him, but a quick peek through his profile showed a man who seemed to have it all together, a lawyer, which explained the fancy suit. Curiosity got the better of me, and I hit accept. It wasn't long before his first message popped up one evening while I was balancing my accounts. Michael. Hey Emma, thanks for accepting my request. Noticed we have a few friends in common. How's it going? Simple enough, right? But it was his follow-up messages that really got me. He was witty and had a way of making me laugh, even after a long day. I remember one night, we were chatting about something stupid, like the worst pickup lines we'd ever heard, and his humor just clicked with me. Michael, ever had this one? Are you a magician? Because whenever I look at you, everyone else disappears. Bet you heard that one in your line of work. Emma, oh, for sure, top of the cringe chart. My comeback? Are you a photographer? Because I really want to lead this shoot. He laughed, or at least, he typed out a laugh. Hard to tell, but it felt genuine. After a few weeks of chatting, he suggested meeting up in person. Just a casual coffee, to put a real face to the text, he said. It sounded good to me. The first time we met, it was at this little dive that I loved because they didn't skimp on the caffeine. He was already there when I walked in, scanning a newspaper. He looked up, and that sharp-eyed, professional profile picture did him no justice. He was better in the flesh. "Emma? Wow, you actually look like your pictures. That's a rarity in this city." "Well, thanks. I think you're not so bad yourself, despite the lawyer vibe." He laughed, and that icebreaker just melted away any awkwardness. We talked for hours. It wasn't just fluff either. Michael had depth. He asked about my business, my dreams, and really listened, to what I had to say. The thing about Michael is, he never did anything by halves. When we'd been seeing each other for a year, he decided it was time to take things to the next level. I was closing up shop one chilly evening when he showed up unannounced, his breath misting in the cold air as he held out a small, velvet box. "Emma, I've been thinking," he started, and boy, did he look nervous. "We've been doing great, you and me. I think it's time we thought about making this a permanent deal." I froze, the keys to the store still in my hand. "Michael, are you saying what I think you're saying?" He cracked a smile, that charming, lopsided grin that always made my heart skip. "Yeah, I am. Marry me, Emma. Let's not play around anymore. I want you as my partner, for good." My heart was racing, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. Marriage? Was I ready? But looking into his eyes, seeing the earnestness there, it felt right. "Yes," I breathed out. "Yes, I'll marry you." But then he shifted, his expression turning serious again. "There's something else, though. We need to talk about some legal stuff. Prenup stuff." The word prenup hit me like a bucket of ice water. "Prenup? Really, Michael? Is that necessary?" He hurried to explain, holding my hands in his to stop them from trembling. "Listen, it's not that I don't trust you, Emma. It's just practical, especially with me being a lawyer. I've seen too many messy splits not to be cautious. Plus, it's going to protect both of us." "What kind of protection are we talking about here?" I asked, my voice a mix of curiosity and concern. Michael pulled out some papers from his briefcase. "It's straightforward. If either of us cheats, the cheater loses their assets to the other. Simple and fair. You know I wouldn't cheat on you, Emma. This is just a safety net." I took a deep breath, trying to process it all. The romantic proposal now tangled up with talk of cheating and assets. It wasn't how I pictured my engagement. But then, life with Michael wasn't ordinary, and maybe this was just another part of that. I looked down at the papers, then back at his face, reading the sincerity there. "All right, I'll think about it. But let me be clear, Michael, I'm not planning to ever give you a reason to use this against me." "That's all I'm asking for," he replied, relief washing over his face. We went out to celebrate that night, and despite the weird mix of emotions, the evening was perfect. The restaurant was cozy, the food delicious, and Michael was attentive, making me laugh and forget about the legalities for a few hours. Later, as we walked back to the car under the stars, Michael stopped and pulled me close. "You know I love you, right? No piece of paper's gonna change that." I nodded, resting my head against his chest. "I know, Michael. I love you too. Just, let's make sure this prenup thing doesn't mess us up, okay?" He kissed the top of my head. "It won't. Promise." And that was it. I signed the prenup a few days later, after reading it over with my own lawyer, just to be sure. It felt weird, signing a document that talked about the end of a marriage when ours hadn't even begun. But love's a gamble, and I was all in. I just hoped my bet on Michael was the right one. We were the couple everyone envied, always laughing and whispering to each other at parties. But a few months in, things started to change. It wasn't something I could put my finger on right away, just a chill that settled over us slowly. The real trouble started a few weeks later. We were out shopping, and I was looking for some new scents in a perfume shop. I chatted with the sales guy, just casual talk about fragrances. When we left the store, Michael was fuming. "Who was that?" he barked as soon as we were clear of the crowded mall. I was taken aback. "The sales guy? I was just asking him about the perfumes." "Why?" "Seemed like you were really into him," Michael shot back, his eyes hard. "Are you serious right now?" I stopped walking, staring at him in disbelief. "I was talking about perfumes, Michael. What's gotten into you?" He scoffed, shaking his head as he started walking again. "Nothing. Forget it. Let's just go home." But it didn't stop there. It got worse. Anytime I talked to a man, Michael would sulk or make snide comments. He became colder at home, too, retreating behind his laptop or phone, leaving me to eat dinner alone most nights. One evening, I decided to confront him. I couldn't stand the icy atmosphere anymore. I found him in his study, staring blankly at a spreadsheet. "Michael, we need to talk," I said, standing in the doorway. He didn't look up. "About?" "About us. About how you've been acting lately." I walked over and closed the laptop in front of him. "You've been distant, and any time I interact with another guy, you act like I've committed some crime." He rubbed his temples, sighing heavily. "Emma, you don't understand the pressure I'm under at work. And when I see you, laughing and chatting with other men, it gets to me, okay? And sometimes, I feel like you don't respect our relationship enough to keep your distance." We stared at each other, the air thick with unsaid things, and the echo of our raised voices. But then, something new stirred the pot. Rumors from friends started trickling in, saying Michael had been telling people I was a flirt, chatting up other men whenever he turned his back. I couldn't believe it. "You've been talking about me behind my back? Telling people I flirt with other guys?" "Look, Emma, it's not like that. I might have said something here or there, but it's only because I see how they look at you, how you—" "Stop." I cut him off, my anger peaking. "I don't believe this. You have no right to spread lies about me. You're supposed to be my partner, Michael, not my biggest critic." After that last big fight, things between Michael and me cooled off a bit. One morning, I found a note from Michael on the kitchen counter. His handwriting, usually so precise, looked rushed this time. I picked it up, my heart pounding a little harder than usual. "Emma, let's try to start over. Meet me at the Grandview Hotel, room 204, at 8 p.m. tonight. Let's put the past behind us and move forward. M." I stared at the note for a long minute. This was unexpected. Maybe this was his way of reaching out, trying to mend things. I decided to go, hope fluttering in my chest like a fragile bird. The day dragged by. Work was a blur. I couldn't focus on the customer orders or the inventory. My mind kept drifting back to the note, to what the evening might bring. Could we really start over? By the time I shut the shop and headed to the hotel, I was a bundle of nerves. When I arrived at the Grandview, my palms were sweaty. I checked my reflection in the car mirror, fixed my hair, dabbed on a bit of lipstick. Not too much. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard. Room 204 was on the second floor. The hallway was quiet, just the soft hum of the air conditioning. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, then, with a hesitant hand, turned the doorknob. It was open. The room was dimly lit by a bedside lamp, casting long shadows across the bed. There was an open bottle of wine on the table, 2 glasses beside it, and a small plate of fruit slices. But no Michael. "Michael?" I called out, stepping inside, letting the door click shut behind me. "Are you here?" Silence. Just the soft whir of the air conditioner. I thought about leaving, but then I decided to wait. I poured myself a glass of wine, the red liquid swirling in the glass. "Just one glass," I muttered to myself, to calm the nerves. I took a sip, the wine rich and a little too sweet. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. The wine was starting to make my head a bit fuzzy, or was it my nerves? I lay back, just to rest my eyes for a moment. The room spun gently, and then everything went black. When I woke up, it was dark outside. I tried to sit up, but my head was pounding, and my thoughts were foggy. My phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it, the light from the screen blindingly bright in the dim room. I checked the time. It was past midnight. Panic clawed at my chest. I tried to remember what happened, how I ended up lying here, but it was like grasping at smoke. I realized with a start that I was not dressed, lying there without my clothes. I called Michael, my fingers trembling as I dialed his number. The phone rang, then, his voice, cold and distant. "Emma? What's up?" "Michael, where are you? Why didn't you come to the hotel?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Hotel? What are you talking about, Emma? Are you drunk? Have you lost your mind?" "I'm at the Grandview, like you told me. Why did you ask me to come here if you weren't going to show up?" My voice rose in anger and confusion. "Emma, I don't know what sick game you're playing, but I didn't write any note. I've been home all night. You're out of control, running around with your lovers. I even thought about calling the police." Driving home from that disastrous night at the hotel, my mind was in turmoil. Michael's cold, dismissive voice on the phone replayed over and over in my head. What was happening? It felt like I was being sucked into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As I pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of our home brought no comfort, only a knot of dread in my stomach. I stepped inside, and the tension hit me like a wave. Michael was pacing the living room, his face twisted in anger. As soon as he saw me, he exploded. "There you are! The wandering wife returns," he yelled, his voice dripping with scorn. "Michael, please, we need to talk. Something very wrong happened tonight," I pleaded, my voice shaky but desperate to make him understand. But he wasn't listening. Instead, he slammed a stack of photos on the table. "Explain these then," he shouted. I picked up the photos, my hands trembling. They showed me in a hotel room, in bed with a man I had never seen before. My heart sank. "Michael, I don't know who this is. I swear, I've never seen this man before. Something happened to me tonight, something I can't explain." He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that sent shivers down my spine. "A monstrous mistake? Or just your monstrous behavior? Marrying you was the real mistake." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I fought them back, needing to stay strong, to stay clear-headed. "I didn't do this, Michael. You have to believe me." But he wasn't done. "Believe you? Why should I? You're a liar and a cheat. And I'll make sure you don't get a cent from me. I'm going to court, and I will take everything from you, as per our agreement." He spat out before grabbing his suitcase, already packed, and heading for the door. With a final glare, he slammed the door behind him, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the house. I collapsed on the couch, my body shaking. The pain in my head was relentless, throbbing with an intensity that made it hard to think. But it was more than just a headache, it felt like my brain was foggy, my memories of the night blurred and inconsistent. That's when it hit me, the wine. I had only one glass, but the dizziness and the blackout didn't make sense. It was too extreme, too sudden. I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend Lisa, a nurse, hoping she could shed some light on my symptoms. "Lisa, something's not right." I had a glass of wine, and then everything went black. I woke up hours later, and now Michael has these photos. "It doesn't add up," I explained hurriedly, my words tumbling out. There was a pause on the other end as Lisa digested my words. "Emma, it sounds like you might have been drugged. You need to get to a hospital or a lab and get tested right now. Tell them what happened, especially about the wine and your symptoms." The drive to the lab was a blur, my thoughts racing as I tried to piece everything together. At the lab, I explained the situation to the technician, who nodded solemnly and took several vials of blood. A couple of days after my visit to the hotel, a letter arrived with a heavy thud on my doorstep. It was from Michael. My hand shook as I tore it open, my worst fears confirmed in the cold, formal language of the legal notice. Michael was suing me for infidelity, aiming to strip me of everything I owned based on our prenuptial agreement. The trial was set for a month from now. I called my lawyer, Paul, immediately. His voice was a small comfort amid the chaos. "Emma, come to my office. We need to strategize." I drove to Paul's office, my mind racing with every possible scenario except the one where I came out unscathed. As I pulled into the parking lot, my eyes caught a familiar figure, Michael, walking alongside a young man, the same one from the photos he had used to frame me. Without thinking, I reached for my phone and started recording. I caught them exchanging an envelope, the young man tucking it quickly into his jacket. My heart pounded as I realized the significance of what I might have just captured. At Paul's office, I showed him the video. His eyebrows shot up as he watched the exchange. "This is good, Emma. It's very suspicious. I think it's time we brought in a private investigator." Paul's friend, a seasoned private investigator named Jack, took the case. He moved quickly, tailing the young actor and digging into his background. A few days later, Jack called us into the office with news. "I've spoken to the kid," Jack started, his expression serious. "He's a bit of an actor, down on his luck. Said your husband hired him to play a part." "The part? Your lover." "He also confessed that your husband planned everything, even the drugged wine." As we were talking, my phone pinged with an email, my blood test results. I opened the attachment, my breath catching as I read the findings. Positive for a potent sedative, just as Jack had said. I passed my phone to Paul, who read the results and looked up, his eyes hardening with resolve. "This is it, Emma. This is what we need. With this evidence, we can not only defend you, but also turn the tables on Michael." Paul advised keeping everything under wraps until the court date. "Let's not tip him off. We'll hit him with this in court, give him the surprise of his life." A week had passed since the hotel debacle, and I was back in the familiar confines of my lingerie store, trying to keep my mind off the upcoming court date. It was a regular afternoon until Michael walked in, a woman on his arm. "Emma, meet Lila, my bride-to-be," he announced with a pride that didn't quite reach his eyes. Lila looked young, too young perhaps to understand the type of man she was dealing with. She glanced at me with a mixture of curiosity and judgment. Michael wasted no time stirring up trouble. "Take a good look around, Emma. Soon enough, all this will be mine." His arm swept across the expanse of my store with theatrical grandeur, a smirk playing on his lips. Lila's eyes followed his gesture, her look hardening with more conviction. I wanted to reach out, to warn her, but I remembered Paul's strict instructions to keep quiet until the hearing. All I could do was smile thinly and respond with as much dignity as I could muster. "We'll see what the judge has to say about that, Michael." The day of the court session arrived all too quickly. The courtroom was austere, the air thick with anticipation. Michael, ever the lawyer, chose to represent himself. He stood, adjusting his tie, a clear show of self-assurance as he prepared to deliver his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, his voice steady and clear, "today you will see the true colors of a woman who not only broke the vows of marriage but sought to destroy the sanctity of our home with her deceit. As you will see from these photos," he continued, gesturing to the evidence displayed on the screen behind him, "my wife, Emma, was not the faithful partner she promised to be." The photos from the hotel room flashed up, eliciting murmurs from the courtroom. For months, I lived in torment, suspecting her infidelities. And finally, as these pictures show, my worst fears were confirmed. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink. He walked closer to where I sat, his eyes locked on mine. "Emma here would have you believe she's a victim, an innocent caught in circumstances beyond her control." His tone was scathing, his words rehearsed, but effective. "But I tell you, she is not a victim. She is a perpetrator, a destroyer of our union." As he spoke, I could see the calculated pauses, the measured glances at the judge, the way he laid out each sentence with the precision of a seasoned attorney. The evidence is clear, undeniable. Emma's actions have caused irreparable damage, not just to our marriage but to the very fabric of trust that binds any relationship. Michael concluded, his speech crescendoing in a dramatic plea for justice. My lawyer, Paul, had a calm demeanor as he rose to address the court, his briefcase full of the evidence that would clear my name. Your Honor, Paul began, his voice steady and commanding. Today, we not only defend Emma Clark's honor but also reveal a pattern of deceit perpetrated by her husband, Michael Clark. He motioned to the back of the courtroom, and the actor whom Michael had hired walked in, his presence causing a stir among the spectators. Paul asked him to share his involvement, and the young man looked nervously around before speaking. I was hired to act a part, I thought it was just a prank, he admitted, his voice shaky. I didn't realize the seriousness of what was being orchestrated. Paul nodded gravely, then presented the blood test results to the court. These results show that Emma was incapacitated against her will, drugged by substances she had no knowledge of consuming. The courtroom murmured as the implications sank in. Furthermore, Paul continued, his tone hardening, this is not the first time Mr. Clark has employed such tactics. He laid out evidence of Michael's previous marriages, detailing how similar patterns had led to his unjust enrichment at the expense of his former wives. As Paul concluded his arguments, the weight of the evidence was palpable. We ask not only for the dismissal of the fraudulent claims made against Emma, but also for just compensation for the ordeal she has endured. The judge nodded, taking in everything before delivering her verdict. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, I find in favor of Emma Clark. The prenuptial agreement is hereby annulled. Relief washed over me, tears pricking my eyes, not just from the victory but from the vindication. Furthermore, the judge added, the court awards Mrs. Clark damages in the amount of $400,000. Michael's face was ashen, his future crumbled before him. His fiancée, present in the courtroom, hurried out, only to return briefly to whisper a thank you to me for exposing the truth before leaving him for good. The news of the trial spread like wildfire, the details sensational enough to hit the headlines. Michael's professional reputation was irrevocably damaged, he was stripped of his license to practice law. The revelation prompted his ex-wives to file lawsuits against him, uncovering a trail of deceit that left him financially and socially bankrupt. As I closed up shop one evening, the glow of the sunset casting long shadows on the floor, I reflected on the journey. The battle had been hard-fought, marked by moments of despair and indignity, but ultimately, it was a testament to resilience and justice. Hi, I'm Ella. It all started back when I was a fresh-faced hairdresser, barely out of school and already behind the chair at a small salon downtown. Those were simpler times, just me and my scissors, and the whole world seemed like it was there for the taking. It was a regular Tuesday when James first walked in. The bell above the door jangled and in he came, looking around like he wasn't sure he'd come to the right place. His hair was a mess, a wave of thick curls that looked like they fought comb and scissors equally. Hey, you open for a walk-in? He asked, his voice unsure over the buzz of hairdryers and chit-chat. Sure thing, take a seat, I said, pointing to my chair. He sat down, and I threw the cape over him, snapping it at the back a bit tighter than necessary. What are we doing today? Just, make it look like I ain't been dragged through a hedge backwards, he joked, half smiling in the mirror. I laughed, picking up my scissors. I reckon I can do that. As I worked, we started talking. Turns out, we both had a thing for old-school rock bands and hated modern pop. Can't stand that electronic stuff they play everywhere now, he grumbled. Tell me about it. Give me some Zeppelin or Floyd any day, I replied, snipping away. Exactly, he said, and just like that, it was like we'd known each other for years. We talked about everything under the sun, books, movies, you name it. By the time I was done, his hair looked 100 times better, and there was something in his smile that told me this wouldn't be the last I'd see of him. He came back every other week for a trim, always timing his visits so it'd be my chair he'd end up in. We started grabbing coffee after my shifts, and those coffees turned into dinners, and well, you know how it goes. A year later, we were married. Nothing fancy, just us and our families in the backyard of his folks' place. We were so broke back then that our honeymoon was 3 days in a lakeside cabin that smelled like mildew and old fish. But we didn't care, we were on top of the world. Then along came Michael, our little bundle of joy. Having him was tough at first, what with money being tight and me trying to juggle motherhood with work. But we made it through, mostly because James was right there with me, taking on night feeds and diaper changes without a single complaint. Life was good. Really good. We had our ups and downs, sure, but who doesn't? I loved my job, got to meet all sorts of folks from around town. Everyone had a story, and they all seemed to want to share theirs with me. Guess I just have one of those faces. 30 years sure fly by when you're busy living life. Now, I'm 52, and not just any hairdresser, but the one in town everyone waits a month to see. James climbed his way up too, now he's the big boss at his company. We've got ourselves a beautiful house that's a bit too quiet now that it's just the two of us. Our son Michael, 29 and all grown up, lives in his own place across town. Life at the salon was always bustling, but on one rainy afternoon, it got a bit more interesting. Clara walked in, drenched from head to toe, looking like she needed more than just a hairdryer. She had a sad sort of look in her eyes that caught me right away. I could tell she needed a chat as much as a new hairstyle. "Rough day, huh?" I asked as she plopped down in my chair, not even caring as the water dripped from her coat onto the floor. "You could say that," she sighed, taking off her soggy hat and revealing a mess of tangled, wet hair. "Just split with my boyfriend. Feels like my heart's been through the ringer." "Well, you're in the right place for a pick-me-up," I said, draping a towel around her shoulders. "Let's get you dried off and fixed up. How about we try something new today? Give you a fresh start?" Clara nodded, looking up at me through the mirror. "I'd like that. I really would." As I worked on her hair, we talked about all sorts. Turns out, she was new in town, trying to start over after everything that had gone south with her ex. I found myself giving her bits of advice, not just about hair, but about finding her feet in a new place. By the time I was done, she had a sleek new bob that framed her face perfectly, and her smile was starting to peek through again. "You know, I feel lighter already," she admitted, checking out her new look. "Thanks, Ella. Seriously." "Anytime, Clara. You know where to find me," I said, handing her the mirror so she could see the back. Just then, Michael walked in, surprising me during work hours. He'd been doing some errands around town and decided to drop by. His eyes landed on Clara, and I saw that same spark I'd noticed between me and James all those years ago. "Mom, hey, who's this?" Michael asked, trying not to make it obvious he was checking Clara out. "This is Clara. Clara, meet my son Michael. He's usually not around during the day, thinks he's too busy for his old mom," I joked, giving Michael a playful glare. "Nice to meet you, Clara. And Mom, I'm never too busy for you," Michael shot back with a grin. Clara laughed, and I could see her warming up to Michael's charm. "Nice to meet you too, Michael. Your mom's been telling me all about the town. Sounds like you both know it inside out." "Yeah, well, I could show you some places if you like," Michael offered, and I almost rolled my eyes at how smooth he was being. "That'd be great," Clara said, her smile bright and genuine now. As they chatted, I cleaned up my station, keeping one ear on their conversation. It was clear they clicked instantly. Michael offered to take her out for a coffee to continue their tour guide chat, and Clara agreed. Watching them walk out together, I felt a mix of emotions. I was happy for Michael, seeing him light up around Clara, but a part of me worried, too. Starting new relationships on the rebound can be tricky, and I hoped he wouldn't end up getting hurt. Michael and Clara, who quickly became like a daughter to me, had rushed into marriage. It was a whirlwind, sure, but seeing them so happy made everything feel right. We often had them over at our place, where laughter filled the rooms more than the light. I loved those dinners. Clara would always joke about her taste in men, teasing Michael by saying she liked them slender and athletic. Michael would play along, sucking in his gut and flexing like a bodybuilder, which had us all cracking up every time. It was all in good fun. And after we ate, Clara would help clean up without missing a beat, saying she couldn't just sit and watch me do all the work. It warmed my heart to have such a caring daughter-in-law. James and we were doing all right ourselves. He had become a big shot at his company, always busy, always on the move. But things started to change, subtly at first. He began working late more often, and his business trips multiplied. I'd ask him about all the extra hours and travel, and he'd just shrug it off, saying, "It's a busy season, Ella. Gotta make hay while the sun shines." I couldn't argue with that, but it was his newfound love for the gym that really threw me for a loop. One morning, I found him digging out workout clothes from the back of our closet. "What's all this about?" I asked, watching him as he packed a gym bag. "Got to keep up with the young guys at work," he chuckled, zipping the bag shut. "Can't let them think I'm getting old." "That so?" I teased, leaning against the doorframe. "Well, look at you, Mr. Fitness." He flashed me a grin. "Who knows, maybe I'll get abs like Michael." I laughed, because the thought of James, who usually avoided physical exertion like it was the plague, suddenly turning into a gym buff, was too bizarre. But, I have to admit, part of me was glad. Glad he was taking care of himself. It seemed like a good thing. Life seemed almost perfect. Our home was filled with love and laughter, our careers were thriving, and with Michael and Clara so happy, grandkids didn't seem like a far-off dream anymore. But every so often, when James would leave for another sudden business trip or come home late from the gym, a small voice in the back of my head whispered doubts. I pushed them away, telling myself it was all normal, just part of life's routine adjustments. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling entirely. Watching him pack for another trip, I'd find myself asking, "Everything okay at work?" "Same as ever, just the grind," James would answer, and though his words were reassuring, his eyes didn't quite meet mine like they used to. I started watching the clock, noting when he left and when he got back. The intervals were stretching longer, the explanations shorter. "Just ran into some traffic," or "had to help a colleague out," became common refrains. One night, lying in bed waiting for him to come home, I realized that no matter how perfect things seemed, there was a crack somewhere. I just hoped it was my imagination running wild, a silly phase that would pass. Because the alternative, the possibility that something serious was amiss, was something I wasn't ready to face. Not yet. It was a regular Thursday at the salon when Marie, a client I've known for years, came in bubbling with excitement about her recent vacation. As she settled into the chair, she started showing me videos they'd taken. "We caught so much of the trip, Ella, look at this one," she beamed, scrolling through her phone. As she held up the screen, a video of a bustling restaurant played. I watched, half listening as Marie narrated their dining experience, but my attention snapped fully when the camera unintentionally captured a couple at the next table in a deep kiss. My heart sank, my breath caught in my throat. It was James and Clara, Michael's wife, tangled up in each other, completely lost in the moment. "Can you send that to me?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Marie, puzzled by my sudden interest, nodded slowly and forwarded the video to me. "Sure, but are you all right, Ella? You look pale." I forced a smile, shaking my head slightly. "Yeah, just thought I saw someone I knew. Thanks." The rest of the day passed in a blur. My hands moved mechanically, cutting and styling, but my mind was stuck on that video. The image of James and Clara together haunted every moment. I didn't dare call James. Instead, I waited until I was home, my nerves stretched tight, and called Michael. "Michael, I need you to come over. It's important," I said as soon as he picked up, trying to keep my voice steady. When he arrived, his face was etched with concern. "Mom, what's going on? Are you okay?" I didn't meet his eyes as I handed him my phone with the video queued up. "Just watch," I said, my voice breaking. The color drained from Michael's face as he watched. The shock, the realization, hit him all at once. Dad? And Clara? His voice was a mix of disbelief and pain. He looked from the phone to me, searching for an answer. Before I could reply, the front door swung open and in walked James, Clara beside him, both laughing about something trivial. The sight of them so carefree twisted the knife deeper into my chest. James, still smiling, started, "Guess who I ran into today and gave a ride?" His words hung in the air as he finally noticed the atmosphere. Michael threw the phone on the table, the video still playing, the sound of their laughter grotesquely out of place now. James's smile faltered, his eyes flicking from the phone to our faces, realizing what had happened. Clara's smile dropped as she followed his gaze to the screen displaying their indiscretion. The second that video ended, the air in the room turned icy. James turned pale as if he'd seen a ghost, while Clara, with a cruel smirk, didn't even try to hide her glee. "I love him," she declared, pointing unabashedly at James. "And honestly, Ella, you're old. He doesn't want you anymore." Her words stung like a slap. I felt a deep, hollow ache in my chest. I couldn't believe I had welcomed such a snake into our home, into our family. How had I been so blind? Michael's reaction was instant. His face flushed with anger as he stood up, towering over his father. "I'm done with you, Dad. And you." He turned his fury towards Clara. "Get out of my house." Clara's laugh was sharp, her voice laced with entitlement. "And where am I supposed to go? I'm entitled to half of this apartment and alimony. You owe me that much." Michael scoffed, the sound bitter and full of scorn. "The apartment was mine before we even met. It's in my name only. And as for alimony," he sneered, "your cheating has taken care of that. You get nothing." While Clara fumbled for a response, James stepped in, his voice cold and calculated. "We need to talk about our assets, Ella. We've got 30 years of marriage here. I want half of everything." His audacity was breathtaking. My entire world was crumbling, and he was worried about money. The nerve of him, after what he'd done, to stand there and demand a share of our life together as if he hadn't just betrayed everything we built. The divorce was nasty, drawn out, and every encounter dripped with venom, especially from James. He strutted into court, playing the wronged party, trying to smear my name and grab as much as he could from the ruins of our marriage. It was excruciating to watch the man I had loved twist our memories into lies, just to gain an upper hand. And Clara, oh Clara had the gall to taunt me outside the courtroom on the last day. "You're just an old woman, Ella. James wanted someone young and beautiful, like me." Her words echoed in my ears, each syllable a pointed dagger meant to wound. It felt like the ultimate betrayal, not just of the heart but of all the years we'd spent side by side. I drove home those days feeling like the shell of the woman I used to be, questioning my worth, questioning every year we'd spent together. But through this storm, Michael was my rock. He stood by me, his presence a constant reminder that not everything from my marriage was a loss. Seeing the strength and integrity in my son, I realized that if my marriage had given me nothing else, it had given me him, a man who knew right from wrong, who stood up for what was right even when it was hard. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, took a deep breath, and made a vow to myself. "Ella, it's time to rebuild, from the ground up." The reflection staring back at me nodded, as if sealing the pact. One of the hardest decisions I had to make was about the house. It was too full of memories, too big for just me. Plus, the settlement required that we sell it and split the proceeds. "Fresh start, Ella," I muttered to myself as I signed the papers at the real estate agent's office. "Trust me, you're making the right move," the agent, a kindly middle-aged man named Roger, assured me. "Something smaller, more manageable, it'll be good for you." He was right. I bought a cozy 2-bedroom apartment closer to the city center, perfect for one. The day I moved in, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. As I unpacked boxes and arranged furniture, there was a sense of creating something new, something wholly mine. The next challenge was work. My career had always been a part of who I was, and I wasn't about to give that up. With the divorce settlement, I had some capital, and a fiery drive to not just continue, but to expand. I decided to open my own beauty salon. Finding the right location took time. I walked through countless potential spots, each time envisioning what could be. When I finally found the perfect place, a small but bright space on a busy street, I knew it was the one. "I can see it now," I told Michael, who had come along to give his approval. "Ella's Elegance, right there on the sign." He grinned, his earlier support unwavering. "It's perfect, Mom. You're going to make it into something amazing." The process of opening the salon was grueling. Renovations, permits, supplies, it seemed endless. But with each step completed, I felt a surge of accomplishment. This was mine, my creation, my new beginning. The grand opening was a flurry of excitement. Friends, longtime clients, and even curious passers-by filled the space, their chatter and laughter breathing life into the once empty shop. 3 years have passed since the divorce, and looking back, I barely recognize the woman I was when this all started. My business has flourished, becoming more than I had dared to hope. The community's support has been overwhelming, and in return, I've done my best to give back, to create a space that's welcoming and warm. Michael got married again 2 years after the divorce. He met Lisa at a community event, and they hit it off right away. They've since had twins, a boy and a girl. Seeing him so happy, so fulfilled, it's given me a new kind of joy I didn't know I was missing. As I lock up the salon at night, the last of the sunset casting a warm glow through the front windows, I often pause and reflect. This journey, every up and down, every setback, and every victory, has reshaped me. I'm not the same person I was, and I'm grateful for it. In those moments, surrounded by the hum of dryers and the smell of shampoo, I realized I had found my way out of the darkness. The betrayal that had once threatened to break me had instead built me stronger, fiercer. One day, out of the blue, I received a call from James, my ex-husband. His voice was casual, as if we were old friends catching up, but his words were like a slap in the face. "Ella, I think it's only fair I get half of your beauty salon. It's doing well, and frankly, it was started with my money since I was the main breadwinner for so long." The nerve of him, after everything, to claim a piece of what I had built from scratch with my own money, post-divorce. I was seething, but I kept my cool. "Okay, James, let's meet and talk about it," I said, plotting to turn the tables on him. After hanging up, I called Michael. He was furious when he heard and suggested we dig a little deeper into James's life now. "Mom, let's see what he's really up to," he said, proposing to hire a private investigator. I agreed. It was time to uncover whatever James and that woman he left us for were hiding. We chose to meet in a crowded cafe downtown. I arrived early, spotted them from a distance, James, looking older but trying hard to appear youthful, beside his much younger wife, Clara, who was visibly pregnant. Sitting down, I braced myself for a tiresome charade. James wasted no time. "Ella, thanks for coming. You know, with the baby on the way, Clara wants to start her own salon. We think a share of your business would be a good start for our family's future." Clara looked at me, smirking smugly as if she had already won this battle. I forced a smile, listening to James ramble about the bright future he envisioned for his new family, all the while thinking how deluded he was. Finally, when he paused for breath, I saw my moment. "James, you're living in a fantasy. This business you want so badly? It was built entirely without your money or influence. And as for this child you're so excited about..." I paused, my smile fading as I pulled out a series of photos and slid them across the table to him. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. James and Clara leaned in to look at the photos, clear shots of Clara with another man, not just in casual settings but leaving a hotel together. "And there's more," I continued, my voice steady, despite the chaos I was unleashing. "James, remember when you had chickenpox so bad at 38? The doctor said it left you infertile. I didn't have the heart to tell you before, thinking it would crush you. The color drained from James's face. Clara's eyes widened in horror as she turned to him, her hands trembling. "You're lying," Clara shrieked, her voice breaking. James just sat there, stunned, as reality crashed down around him. He turned to Clara, anger contorting his features. "Is this true? Are you cheating on me?" The cafe around us had gone silent, all eyes glued to our table. Clara started sobbing, her previous arrogance washed away by public humiliation. "James, I can explain," she stammered, but James was already on his feet. "I don't want to hear it. We're done." He was shouting now, causing a scene as his world fell apart. "Get out of my life." I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. "I think this meeting is over," I announced, my voice loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I want nothing more to do with either of you." As I walked away, the last thing I saw was Clara weeping and James yelling, the staff rushing over to intervene. I stepped out into the sunlight, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. A few days later, I was at the salon, tidying up after a busy day. The bell above the door jingled, and I looked up to see Michael walking in, his face bright with a smile. "Hey, Mom, how's the champion of independence doing today?" he teased, walking over to give me a hug. I laughed, handing him a broom to help me clean up. "Oh, stop it. But I won't lie, it feels good. Really good." "That's what I like to hear," Michael replied, starting to sweep. "So, what's next for you?" I paused, leaning on my broom. "Well, I've been thinking about that a lot. I want to do more than just run the salon. I want to give back somehow." Michael nodded, looking thoughtful. "You've got a lot to offer, Mom. Maybe some kind of mentorship program? You know, for young women starting out?" "That's exactly what I was thinking," I said, excitement bubbling up inside me. "I want to help them build their own futures, make sure they have the support they need." The following weeks flew by as I put our ideas into action. I reached out to local community centers and schools, setting up workshops and talks. The response was overwhelming. So many young women came, eager to learn and grow. One evening, after a particularly successful workshop, I sat in my salon, reflecting on everything that had happened. The phone rang, and I answered it, still in a reflective mood. "Ella's Elegance, this is Ella." "Mom, it's me," came Michael's cheerful voice. "Just wanted to check in. How was the workshop today?" "It was fantastic, Michael. These girls, they're so bright and full of potential. It makes me feel like I'm really doing something worthwhile," I replied, a smile spreading across my face. "That's awesome, Mom. I knew you'd be great at this." We chatted a bit more, and after hanging up, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had come so far from the woman who thought her life was over after a divorce. Now, here I was, making a real impact, feeling more fulfilled than I ever had. My name's Lila. I've always been the kind of person who prefers code to cocktails, a quiet evening over a raucous party. But life has a funny way of throwing you into the unexpected. That night at the party, hosted by a friend from college, was supposed to be another routine social gathering. I was already planning my escape route to my cozy apartment and my awaiting laptop when he walked in. David was hard to miss. At 22, he had the kind of energy that filled up a room. With his athlete's build and an easy smile, he was surrounded by admirers the moment he stepped through the door. I tried to keep to my corner, nursing my drink and fiddling with my phone, but fate had other plans. "Hey, you're Lila, right?" His voice cut through the noise, pulling me back from my digital refuge. I looked up to find those intense eyes fixed on me. "Yeah, that's me. And you are?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "David Matthews, the rising hockey star everyone seemed to talk about." "David, I've heard a lot about you. You're the genius programmer at Turner Tech, right?" His grin was infectious, and I found myself smiling, despite my initial resolve to remain disinterested. "Genius might be stretching it, but yeah, I work for an IT company. I said, trying to play it cool. David chuckled, pulling up a chair next to me, uninvited but not unwelcome. So, what brings you to a party where you clearly wish you were anywhere else? I shrugged, looking around at the bustling room. Guess I was trying to be social. My friends keep telling me I need to get out more. That's funny. David leaned in, his voice dropping to a playful whisper. Because I've been trying to get out of these things too. Too much fake chatter. You want to escape? Let's grab some real food, this party stuff is just fluff. I hesitated. This wasn't my usual style, but there was something about David that felt different, genuine. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, like he really saw me, not just the quiet girl in the corner. As we sneaked out of the party, the cool night air felt like a splash of clarity. We ended up at a 24-hour diner, the kind with greasy fries and endless coffee. David ordered the biggest burger on the menu for us to split, and I found myself sharing stories about coding mishaps and server crashes. David listened, really listened, nodding and asking questions that showed he got it, even if he didn't know a router from a modem. It was refreshing, talking to someone who didn't glaze over when I geeked out about technology. As the night turned into early morning, I realized that David wasn't just a hotshot athlete, he was thoughtful, funny, and surprisingly down to earth. Maybe that's why when he suggested we do this again next Friday, I didn't think twice before saying yes. David and I had been the talk of our circle since he started courting me. Despite our age difference, with me being 32 and him only 22, there was something electric between us. Honestly, it was flattering to have someone so vibrant and full of promise by my side. The day David decided to introduce me to his mom, Susan, I was nervous. The moment we arrived, the look on her face said it all. It was like she had tasted something sour just seeing me. So, you're Lila, Susan began, sizing me up as if I were an item at an auction. David has told me very little about you, which I suppose isn't surprising. I tried to smile, extending my hand. It's nice to meet you, Susan. She barely touched my hand before pulling back. Let's sit down. We have a lot to discuss, apparently. As we sat in her meticulously decorated living room, the air thick with tension, Susan didn't waste any time. David tells me you two are planning to marry. He's a professional athlete, on his way to becoming a star. And you, Lila, you're a programmer, correct? And quite a bit older than him. Yes, I am a programmer, I replied, keeping my voice steady, despite her tone. And yes, there's an age difference, but we love each other. Susan scoffed. Love, she muttered under her breath. David, she's 32. You're just 22. You should be thinking about your career, not settling down with someone who... Mom, David interrupted, his voice firm. I love Lila. That's what matters to me. We're getting married. Susan's eyes narrowed. You're blinded by infatuation. Think about your future, your contracts, your endorsements. This is a mistake. I felt a surge of defiance. I'm not here to argue, Susan. I came because David wanted us to meet. I respect your concern, but our decision to marry is ours to make. David nodded, squeezing my hand under the table. Exactly. We've talked this through, and we're serious. Lila's age, her job, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is how we feel about each other. Susan leaned back, her expression unreadable for a moment before she spoke again. Well, it seems I can't convince my own son to think clearly. If you're going to be part of this family, Lila, I expect you to understand the pressures David will face. Can you handle that? Without dragging him down? Her words stung, but I held my gaze. I'm not here to drag anyone down, Susan. I support David fully, in his career and everything else. There was a pause, a heavy, uncomfortable silence, before Susan stood up abruptly. I need to think about this. David, you're welcome to stay for dinner. Lila, I think it's best if you leave now. David started to protest, but I stopped him. It's okay, David. Let's not make this harder. I'll go, but think about what I said, Susan. I'm not the enemy here. When I found out I was pregnant, I was over the moon with joy. David was thrilled too when I told him, and he immediately suggested we speed up our wedding plans. Let's not wait, Lila. Let's get married as soon as we can, he said, his eyes shining with excitement and a bit of urgency. The joy of our news, however, didn't quite extend to everyone. When David broke the news to his mom, Susan, her reaction was less than enthusiastic. "You're what? Pregnant? This changes things," she muttered, clearly agitated by the unexpected twist. David tried to calm her down. "Mom, this is good news. We're happy." Susan paced the room, her brows furrowed in thought before she turned to face us with a stern look. "Fine, but if you're going to do this, you're doing it on my terms. First, you two are signing a prenup." "A prenup?" I echoed, my stomach sinking. "Yes, to ensure my son's future earnings in hockey are protected. He's going to be making millions, and we can't have any risks," Susan explained, her voice firm and non-negotiable. David looked at me, his expression apologetic. "Lila, I know it's not ideal, but my mom has a point about protecting the career I'm building. It's just a formality." I nodded slowly, the reality of our situation settling in. "Okay, what's the second condition?" I asked, bracing myself. "You need to show your commitment to this family, Lila. I want you to handle the initial mortgage payment for your new house, 50% up front." Susan's eyes were locked on mine, challenging me. I was stunned. 50%? That's a lot of money, Susan. David was quick to jump in. "Mom, that's too much. Lila, we can figure something out." But I knew what I had to do. I called my dad later that day, explaining the situation and how much I needed. Without a moment's hesitation, he agreed. "I'll help you, Lila. It's important you start your married life on stable ground," he said, transferring $200,000 to my account. With the financial and prenuptial conditions met, we moved forward with the wedding plans. The day arrived faster than I had anticipated, filled with a mix of emotions. Our wedding was beautiful, set in a quaint little chapel with flowers everywhere, and our closest friends and family gathered. I walked down the aisle, my heart full of love for David and our future together. My parents looked so proud and happy, their smiles beaming across the room. But there, off to the side, stood Susan with a look that could only be described as sour. Throughout the evening, her displeasure was evident. She wore a tight smile as guests congratulated her, her eyes often darting towards me with undisguised disapproval. Despite her attitude, David and I tried to focus on the positive. We mingled with guests, laughed, danced, and celebrated our union and the little life growing inside me. After the wedding, it didn't take long for life to take a sharp turn into the unexpected. Susan declared she'd be moving in with us, supposedly to help me through the early stages of pregnancy. I wasn't keen on the idea, but to avoid any drama, I reluctantly agreed. Little did I know, this decision would soon transform my home into a battleground where peace was a rare commodity. Within weeks of moving in, Susan had taken over the house. It was subtle at first, a few items moved here and there, some new decorations. But soon, her presence and influence grew stronger, more invasive. She didn't do much in terms of actual housework or helping me. Instead, she spent her days shopping with the money David made from his hockey career, filling our already cozy home with lavish furniture and expensive clothes that reflected her taste, not ours. One afternoon, as I was trying to rearrange some of these new additions to make space for my own things, Susan walked in, her eyes scanning the room critically. "Lila, what are you doing? You're just moving things around without improving anything. You should focus more on resting and less on these useless activities," she snapped, her tone harsh and condescending. I bit my tongue, holding back my frustration. "I'm just trying to make some space, Susan. It's getting a bit crowded in here." "Crowded? This is quality, Lila. These are things a proper home should have. You should be thankful," she retorted, waving a dismissive hand at my simpler decorations. Feeling the sting of her words, I tried to keep my cool. Susan, I appreciate your help around the house, but maybe we could tone down the shopping a bit. There's hardly space to move. Susan's eyes narrowed, her voice cold. I'm only trying to bring some standard to this place. If you can't see that, it's not my problem. You should focus on what's important, like taking care of David. The remark hit harder than expected, and I felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. This wasn't the home I had envisioned for us, filled with love and mutual respect, but rather, it was turning into a showcase of Susan's tastes and preferences. Later that evening, when David got home from practice, I decided it was time to discuss the living situation. David, we need to talk about your mom. I started, my voice steady but filled with concern. What about her? He looked tired, rubbing the back of his neck as he sat down. She's taking over the house, David. And she's constantly criticizing me, making me feel like I'm not doing enough around here. I explained, hoping he'd understand. David's face hardened, and he sighed deeply. Lila, she's just trying to help. You know how she is. She wants everything to be perfect. You should try to get along, show her some respect. As the days turned into weeks, Susan's dominance in our home grew. My attempts to reclaim some sense of normalcy or to assert my preferences were met with cold resistance from Susan and frustrating neutrality from David. The more I tried to adapt, the more isolated I felt within my own walls. It was a routine morning, and I was at the clinic for a regular pregnancy checkup, expecting nothing but good news. But the doctor's face told a different story as he reviewed the ultrasound images. Lila, it seems there's a significant developmental issue with the fetus. I recommend further tests, but you need to be prepared for all possible outcomes, including the possibility of not carrying to term. The drive home was a blur, and walking into the house, I was met by Susan's scrutinizing gaze. Well, what did the doctor say? She demanded, her tone more intrusive than concerned. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. It's not great news, Susan. There are complications. The baby might not make it. Susan's reaction was cold, almost mechanical. I see. Well, you need to think about what's best, for you and for David. Sometimes these things are for the best. Her words stung, but I had no energy to argue. I needed David, his support more than ever. When he finally came home, I told him everything, the tears I had held back now freely streaming down my face. David looked devastated, but his words were hollow. I'm so sorry, Lila. We'll get through this. Whatever you need, I'm here. But as the days went on, David's promise felt empty. He seemed distant, retreating into his own world, leaving me to cope with my grief and fear alone. Meanwhile, Susan's true colors came out more vividly than ever. One evening, as I sat in the living room, trying to find some distraction in a book, Susan sat across from me, her eyes sharp. Lila, you need to think about the future. If this pregnancy isn't going to work out, maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's time you and David reconsidered your situation. A childless marriage is bound to fail. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Anger boiled inside me, but before I could respond, David walked in. I looked to him for support, but instead of defending me, he stayed silent. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, the day came when the complications of my pregnancy could no longer be managed. The doctors did what they could, but the decision was inevitable. The pregnancy had to be terminated. As I lay in the hospital bed, coming to terms with the loss, the doctor explained the gravity of my condition. It's going to be difficult for you to get pregnant again, he said with a somber look. Returning home was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I was drained, not just physically, but emotionally. My heart ached in a way that words couldn't describe. I walked through the door in tears, a mess of grief and broken dreams, hoping, praying for some semblance of comfort from the people who were supposed to be my family. What I walked into was anything but comforting. Susan wasted no time. As soon as she saw my state, her words sliced through the air, cold and sharp. Well, look at you. I told you, didn't I? You just aren't cut out for this. You can't even manage to have a healthy child. Her cruel words hit me like physical blows. I stood there, stunned into silence, my tears falling faster. I looked to David, desperate for him to say something, anything in my defense. But David was distant, his eyes avoiding mine. He shifted uncomfortably, then said, "Look, Lila, I have important matches coming up. I can't have all this drama around. It's just too much." I stared at him, disbelief clouding my pain. Our child was not just some drama, David. This was our baby, our future. How can you be so cold? David's face hardened. "I'm tired, Lila. Tired of your complaints and all these problems. I've got a career, and honestly, I've got plenty of options." He paused, his voice dropping as he added, "Maybe it's better if we just end this. I need someone who fits into my life, not complicates it." Susan clapped her hands, a twisted smile on her face. "Finally, some sense from you, David. Lila, you heard him. Pack your things. It's time for you to leave." David didn't help me with my bags, he didn't even say goodbye. As I closed the door behind me, the finality of that click echoed in my heart. When I arrived at my parents' house, my tears hadn't stopped. Seeing me in such a state, Dad was furious. "What happened, Lila? Tell me everything," he demanded, his voice a mix of concern and anger. Through sobs, I recounted everything, how Susan and David had treated me, the cruel words, the demand that I leave the house we shared. Dad's face turned red with each detail I shared, his fists clenching at his sides. "This is not going to stand, Lila. We're going to make sure you get what you deserve," he said, pulling out his phone to make a call. Within hours, he had lined up meetings with some of the best lawyers in the city. The next few days were a whirlwind. We met with a sharp and determined lawyer named Helen, who was appalled by my story. "We'll file for divorce immediately and sue for half of every investment you made in that house," she declared, her tone fierce and resolute. True to her word, Helen moved quickly. The divorce papers were served to David, and the lawsuit for my share of the house investments was filed. David and Susan were shocked. As the legal battle ensued, it became clear that they were in a precarious financial situation because of my mother-in-law's ill-considered spending. David and Susan were forced to sell the house. Meanwhile, David's life seemed to spiral. He met a young fan, a girl who was smitten with the shining star, and married her hastily. I heard about the wedding through friends. It didn't sting as much as I thought it would, instead, it felt like confirmation that leaving him was the right decision. But Susan couldn't resist one last jab. A few weeks after David's rushed wedding, I received a letter from her. Inside was a photo from the wedding, showing Susan beaming next to David and his new wife. On the back, Susan had written a note. "Finally, my son has found a young and healthy woman who will give birth to healthy children for him." The cruelty of her words was meant to wound, and it did, but not as deeply as she intended. The lawsuit dragged on, but eventually, the court ruled in my favor. I was awarded half of the investment we had made in our former home, a sum that significantly strained David's finances further. 2 years have rolled by since I last walked out of that house, feeling broken and betrayed. A lot has changed since then, especially for me and my dad's company. We've been breaking into the international market, and my work paid off in a big way. I received an international award in IT technology, a recognition that came with a prize of $1 million. Just when I thought things were settling down, my phone rang. The screen flashed a number I didn't recognize at first, but the voice that greeted me was unmistakably Susan's. "Lila, you need to come back to David," she stated bluntly, "no hellos, no how have you been." I paused, taken aback. "Susan? Why would you think I'd come back?" Her voice was sharp, tinged with desperation. "David's been injured, a bad accident during a match. He's in a wheelchair now, can't play anymore. His wife left him, took half of everything. We need you." Her words were a jolt, but not enough to shake the foundation I'd rebuilt. "And you think I should return because of his injury? Why, Susan? Just because I have money now?" She didn't hesitate. "You're rich now, Lila. You can afford to take care of him. And me. I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. I'll even cook for you and let you have children, imagine that. I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. Susan, do you hear yourself? You want me back as some sort of nursemaid to David and his financial backer to you, just because I won money? It's always about money with you. Susan's voice cracked, angry and sharp. You owe us, after everything. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see. I owe you nothing, Susan. I built my life again from scratch, without any help from you or David. You threw me out when I was at my lowest. Why would I ever think of coming back? There was a silence on the other end, heavy and thick. Then Susan spat out, You're making a huge mistake, Lila. I made my mistakes, Susan, but I learned from them. And returning to a life that nearly broke me isn't a mistake I'll make twice. I replied, my voice calm and steady. Hanging up the phone, I felt a surge of freedom. Her words no longer had the power to hurt me. I was truly free, and my life was my own. Looking around my office, filled with awards and the buzzing of computers, I knew I was right where I was meant to be. Later, at home, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto my balcony, looking out over the city lights. The challenges of the past seemed like distant memories, and the future was bright and full of promise. I had found success and contentment in my work, and I was surrounded by people who valued and respected me. As I sipped my wine, I thought about Susan's call, her voice so filled with anger and desperation. It was clear that in her world, money still dictated worth. But in my world, I measured wealth not by dollars in the bank, but by the happiness and peace I'd fought so hard to achieve. One crisp morning, as I walked into the office, the buzz of the upcoming product launch was palpable. My team, a group of brilliant and driven individuals, greeted me with enthusiastic updates. Lila, we're almost ready to roll out the new software. Just a few tweaks left. Jenna, one of our lead developers, informed me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. That's great to hear, Jenna. Make sure those tweaks are solid. We can't afford slips, not with so much riding on this, I replied, my tone both encouraging and firm. Jenna nodded, her demeanor serious. Absolutely, Lila. We're on it. I received a call from Dad later. His voice was brimming with pride. Lila, I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you. Not just for your success at the company, but for how you've handled everything life threw at you. Thanks, Dad. It means a lot to hear that from you. I couldn't have done it without your support, I responded, feeling a warmth spread through me. You did the heavy lifting, kiddo. I was just here to offer a hand when you needed it, he said, and we both laughed. That evening, as I walked through the park on my way home, I felt a deep sense of peace. I stopped for a moment, taking in the beauty of the setting sun, the laughter of children playing nearby, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was moments like this that I had once thought were lost to me forever. But here I was, standing strong, the master of my fate once more. I had faced betrayal and loss, fought back against those who sought to bring me down, and emerged not just unscathed but stronger. As I resumed my walk, a plan began to form in my mind. I wanted to use my experiences to help others who might be facing their own battles. Perhaps a foundation, something that could offer support and strength to those in need. Hi, I'm Hannah. Growing up, I had everything a kid could want, loving parents and a cozy home. I was their only kid, and they spoiled me with love, not just stuff. They were big on education too, so after high school, I headed off to college and then landed a job as a travel agent. For over a decade, I hustled at a city travel agency, learning the ropes of the trade. After my folks passed, they left me a bit of money. Nothing crazy, but enough to make me think about starting my own thing. That's how I ended up opening my own travel agency. It was tough in the beginning, like, really tough. I had to scrape and claw for every client I got. But I made it work, and soon enough, the agency started doing alright, even thinking about expanding. I always believed in looking sharp, especially at work and public events. You never know who you're gonna meet, right? So, there I was, a regular at this little salon on the corner of my street, getting my hair done by Marie, a sweet woman in her 60s with hands of magic. We'd chat about everything, my business, her salon, the latest gossip. One day, Marie got all excited while she was washing my hair. "You know, Hannah, I've got a son, Mark. Such a handsome guy, and smart too. But still single. You should meet him." I was a bit taken aback, but went along with it. "Sure, why not? Could be fun." She beamed. "Great. I'll set something up." Fast forward, and I'm sitting across from Mark at a cozy little diner downtown. He was cute, alright, and had a way with numbers, working as a financial expert or something fancy like that. We hit it off, talking about everything from our favorite movies to our crazy work schedules. You gotta have some crazy stories with a job like yours. Yeah, there's never a dull moment, that's for sure. What about you? Any crazy stock market stories? I sipped my coffee, watching his face light up, talking about his day-to-day. Nothing too wild. It's mostly numbers and grumpy old men, Mark shrugged, grinning. But it pays the bills, and then some. We talked for hours, closing the place down. It was easy, comfortable. And just like that, Marie's matchmaking wasn't such a bad idea after all. After Mark and I got hitched, things took a turn. The wedding was a blast, full of laughter and dancing, but the next day it was like I woke up next to a different person. Well, not Mark, he was still the laid-back guy I fell for, but his mom, Marie, she flipped a switch or something. We were having breakfast, just a couple of days after the ceremony, when Marie dropped the bomb. "Hannah, darling, you and Mark should really think about getting a bigger place, you know? Something fitting for a growing family," she said, stirring her tea a bit too vigorously. I choked on my coffee a bit. A bigger place? We just got settled here." Mark chimed in, with that "let's not start a fight" look. "Mom's got a point, Hannah. We could use the extra space. Maybe something with a yard?" I gave him a look. "Sure, I guess. We can start looking." But Marie wasn't just talking about any house. No, she wanted us to buy a huge place, like the kind you see in magazines. And the kicker? She wanted in. Not just as a visitor, but living with us. "Hannah, think about it. If I moved in, I could help out around the house. I'm planning to leave the salon, start something fresh. I've been looking into blogging, maybe a lifestyle thing, you know?" She was all excited, eyes shining. I tried to keep it cool, but inside, I was freaking out. "Blogging, huh? That's interesting. But living together? That's a big step." Marie nodded eagerly. "Exactly. And with my blog, once it takes off, I'll be more than able to contribute." The next thing I knew, I was nodding along, agreeing to house hunt. We ended up with a gorgeous place, way beyond what I thought we needed, but it had that charm, you know? When I saw Marie's eyes light up, I thought, maybe this isn't so bad. Then came moving day. Marie had boxes and boxes of stuff, way more than Mark and I combined. As we unpacked, she directed traffic like a general. No, that box goes in the upstairs hall. And can you put those books in the guest room? It'll be my office." As the weeks went by, Marie's true colors showed. She'd taken over the house, redecorating without asking, and her helping out turned into giving orders. "Hannah, I need you to pick up some things for my new blog setup. Oh, and we need better lighting in here, it's for the blog." I felt cornered, not just by the bills and the new house, but by this whole new family dynamic I hadn't signed up for. "Alright, I guess. We'll look into it." Lying in bed that night, I turned to Mark. "Do you really think all this is necessary? The house, your mom's blog?" Mark was quick to reassure. "It's all gonna work out, Hannah. Trust me, it's all part of settling in." Settling in, right. I signed up for a husband, not a housemate who doubled as my mother-in-law and lifestyle coach. I drifted off, wondering just how much of my new married life would be spent in the shadow of Marie's grand plans. Living with Marie and Mark was turning out to be tougher than I'd ever imagined. Mark's spending was off the charts. Almost every other day, he'd come home with something pricey, a new watch, some fancy shoes, or talking about his latest round at some upscale golf club. He even set aside a whole room just to store and display his collections of high-end watches and leather shoes. I tried to keep things chic but affordable on my end, believing we weren't at the luxury splurge stage yet. This difference in our spending habits was becoming a regular source of friction between us. "Mark, do we really need more watches? Maybe we should be saving a bit more," I said one evening as he unpacked yet another purchase. "Hannah, I make good money. I should be able to enjoy it," he snapped, not looking up from his new shiny gadget. The conversation always ended there, with him shutting down any further discussion. Meanwhile, Marie was on a roll with her new blogging venture. It had started gaining traction faster than any of us expected. But with the fame, her demands grew too. One day, she came to me with a request, or more accurately, a demand, that took me by surprise. "Hannah, darling, I've been thinking. To keep up with my blog's image, I need to get some work done. A facelift, maybe tweak my nose a bit. You know, freshen up," Marie announced as if discussing the weather. I was flabbergasted. "Marie, that sounds expensive. And cosmetic surgery? Are you sure?" She was all smiles. "Oh, absolutely. It's an investment in my career. And you know, being in the public eye now requires looking my best." I frowned. "But that's a lot of money, Marie. Money that could go to our household needs." Marie's tone shifted, turning sharper. "Hannah, you know how much this blog means to me. It's finally something of my own. I thought you, of all people, would understand." I was about to protest when she played her card. "Besides, it's not just for me. It benefits all of us, doesn't it? And I'd hate for any misunderstandings to crop up between you and Mark because you weren't supportive." Her implication was clear: help her out, or she'd stir trouble with Mark. Knowing how she could influence him, I felt my hands were tied. Despite my reservations, I agreed to finance her procedures. Marie underwent the surgery, and it was all she could talk about afterward. Her blog posts about embracing plastic surgery, not fearing the knife, and the importance of looking good raked in more views and comments than ever before. She was proud, reveling in the attention and praise, while I watched our bank account dwindle and wondered if I'd ever be able to pull us back from this spending spiral. 2 years into our marriage, and it felt like I was the only one truly pulling weight around here. My travel agency had really taken off, and I was proud to say that I was the main breadwinner. Not only did I handle all our bills, but I also paid our mortgage all by myself. Day in and day out, I juggled work, home, and everything in between. At night, I'd cook meals tailored to Marie's special diet, keeping the household running smoothly. To anyone looking from the outside, my life with Mark and his mother Marie looked picture perfect. Marie never missed a chance to gush about our wonderful family life and the beautiful home on her blog, painting a pretty picture for her followers. However, the reality inside our walls was a bit different, especially when it came to Marie's latest obsession, her live streaming. One Tuesday morning, this reality came crashing in during one of her broadcasts. I was in the middle of preparing a dietary breakfast for Marie when she decided it was the perfect time to put me on the spot. The kitchen was bustling, Marie with her phone out, capturing every mundane detail for her followers. "And here's the star of the house, my wonderful daughter-in-law, Hannah," Marie announced, thrusting her phone in my direction as I was halfway through flipping an omelette. "Morning, everyone," I said, managing a tight smile, not wanting to drop the omelette in front of the live audience. "Hannah here is the best when it comes to travel. Tell us, dear, what's the latest in the world of travel?" Marie chirped, the camera focusing on me. Clearing my throat, I set down the spatula. "Well, there are some exciting travel deals coming up, especially for those looking to escape the winter chill." Marie's eyes sparkled with an idea, and she leaned closer, her voice a pitch too cheerful. "Speaking of travel, Hannah, why don't you share with our lovely viewers your fabulous idea for our next family vacation?" I believe South Africa was mentioned? I was blindsided. South Africa? I echoed, my mind racing. This wasn't just an impromptu Q&A, this was Marie setting the stage for something much bigger. Yes, a luxury trip to South Africa. Safari tours, 5-star hotels, the works. Viewers, wouldn't you just love to see us on safari? I'm sure Hannah can arrange something spectacular. Her followers immediately chimed in with excitement, their comments flooding the live feed. Pressure mounted as I tried to keep my composure. Well, it's definitely an option, I said, trying to stay non-committal. But let's discuss it later, off camera. As soon as Marie ended the stream, I turned to her, frustration bubbling over. Marie, we need to talk about this. You can't just plan things and announce them without discussing them with me first, especially not live. Marie was unflappable as ever, sipping her coffee. Oh, lighten up, Hannah. It's good for the blog. And good for your business too, don't you think? It's not about the blog, I pushed back, feeling cornered. It's about respecting each other's roles in this family. You can't use your followers to pressure me into decisions. I left the room, leaving Marie to make her far-reaching plans. That evening, things escalated when she complained to Mark. She spun the story, painting me as rude and dismissive of her ideas, claiming I was getting too big for my boots. Mark stormed into the kitchen where I was cleaning up. His face was thunderous. Hannah, we need to talk. Now. He didn't wait for my response, just marched into the living room and I followed, my stomach in knots. He spun around, his words sharp as knives. Mom tells me you're disrespecting her ideas, acting like you're the one who calls all the shots. That's not how we're supposed to work as a family. I was taken aback, the unfairness of the accusation stinging. Mark, that's not true. I've always supported your mom, but nothing, Hannah. You know how important her blog is to her. And if you can't support us, maybe you shouldn't be part of this family. He interrupted, his voice cold. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I tried to reason with him, to explain my side, but he was having none of it. I've even prepared divorce papers, Hannah. I keep them just in case you decide not to follow through with our plans. The words felt like a slap. I spent the night in our guest room, crying, feeling more alone than ever. The idea that Mark would keep such a thing ready was heartbreaking. The next morning, still reeling from the night's threats, I felt a wave of nausea that wouldn't pass. It was more than stress, something was off. I called in sick at work and made my way to the doctor's office, the weight of the world on my shoulders. Sitting in the sterile doctor's office, I was going through the motions, answering questions mechanically until the doctor gave me the news that shifted everything. You're pregnant, he said, looking at me over his glasses. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, a beacon of hope in the turmoil of my marital strife. At 37, this was a moment I had hoped for, but never let myself believe would happen. Despite the chaos at home, this news filled a space in my heart with pure joy. I went home, a plan forming. Maybe this baby was a sign, a reason to mend fences. I found Mark in the office, his demeanor still frosty. Mark, I went to the doctor today, I started, my voice steady, despite the shaking inside. He looked up, wary. And we're going to have a baby, I said, letting the words hang in the air. The change in Mark was instantaneous. His face softened, the edges of anger smoothing out. He stood up, coming over to wrap me in his arms. Really? That's great, Hannah. I'm sorry about last night. Things will be different now. Relief washed over me, mingled with caution. But there was work to be done if I was going to keep this family together. In a move to bridge the gap, I took the initiative to plan the trip to South Africa that Marie had so publicly put on the agenda. I threw myself into the arrangements, booking excursions to Cape Town and Johannesburg, a safari in a national reserve, and trips to both a desert and lush waterfalls. The trip to South Africa was supposed to be a fresh start, a way to mend the growing rifts at home. Instead, it spiraled into a disaster from the very start. As soon as we boarded the plane, Marie began complaining about everything, the length of the flight, the turbulence, and even the meals served on board. "It's way too long. How could you book such an uncomfortable flight, Hannah?" Marie grumbled as another wave of turbulence shook the cabin. Trying to keep my tone even, I replied, "Marie, it's the shortest route available. There's nothing I can do about the flight duration or the turbulence." Her complaints didn't let up, and by the time we landed, I was already exhausted. But that was just the beginning. At the hotel, Marie's dissatisfaction found new targets. The moment we checked in, she started on about the hotel not living up to its online reputation. "This place? This is where we're staying? I expected something far better, given the pictures online. Hannah, are you sure this is the right hotel?" she criticized loudly as we stood at reception. Mark, as always, was quick to back her up. "Yeah, Hannah, Mom's got a point. It doesn't look like what we saw on the website." Feeling the sting of their joint disapproval, I managed to say, "This is one of the best-rated hotels in the area. I'm sorry it's not what you expected, but let's try to make the best of it." Despite my efforts to keep things positive, Marie's and Mark's displeasure only deepened. Marie found fault with every aspect of the hotel, from the service to the food, and Mark echoed her every sentiment. It didn't help that I was feeling increasingly unwell, the early stages of my pregnancy making it hard to keep up with the demanding schedule of tours and activities I had planned. The tipping point came after yet another day of excursions that neither of them enjoyed. Marie summoned me to her room for a serious talk. The moment I entered, she launched into a tirade. "Hannah, you are by far the worst travel specialist I've ever seen. You've completely ruined our trip," she accused, her voice sharp and cold. Stunned, I tried to defend my efforts. "Marie, I've arranged everything according to what we discussed. I'm trying my best here." But she wasn't having any of it. Grabbing my arm, she nearly shouted, "Get out of here, Hannah. Stop ruining our vacation." Before I could react, she pushed me out and slammed the door. Shaken, I returned to my room, only to find my suitcase outside the door. Mark was there, his expression hard and unsympathetic. "I can't deal with this anymore, Hannah. You being sick all the time, it's too much. I think it's best if you leave," he said, his voice void of the warmth I once knew. Feeling a mix of disbelief and heartbreak, I picked up my suitcase. Without a word, I left the hotel. I felt incredibly unwell, my body and mind pushed to their limits. At that moment, all I wanted was to be back in the safety of my own home in the USA. The flight back was agonizing. Every turbulence shook me not just physically, but also emotionally, my stomach churning with pain and distress. I landed back home with a sharp ache that seemed to gnaw deeper with each passing moment. Instead of the comfort of home, my first stop was the emergency room. The diagnosis confirmed my worst fears. I had suffered a miscarriage. As I lay there, trying to process the loss, my phone lit up with countless missed calls from Mark and Marie. With a heavy heart, I called back, only to be thrust into another chaotic situation. Marie's voice crackled through the line, frantic and demanding. "Hannah, it's all gone wrong here. We've been robbed, our documents, our money, everything. And it's gotten even worse," she blurted out, barely pausing for breath. Trying to steady my voice, I asked, "What happened, Marie?" She continued, her voice tinged with panic. "We were out, and I was filming for my blog, just a normal day, when someone snatched our bags. And when I complained about it to the hotel staff, they were so rude, I had to tell them off. They called the police on us, and now we're in jail. You have to help us, Hannah." Her words swirled in my head, piling onto the mountain of stress I was already under. "Marie, I'm in the hospital," I said, my voice breaking. "I've had a miscarriage." There was a brief silence on the line. Then Mark's voice came through, his tone anger and impatience. "It doesn't matter, Hannah, we really need you right now. This is serious, we could be stuck here." The lack of sympathy, the sheer audacity to dismiss my pain so quickly, it was like a slap in the face. "I'm not going to help you. Handle it yourselves." Without waiting for a response, I hung up, a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief coursing through me. In that lonely hospital room, as I grieved the child I would never hold, I made a silent vow to myself. I would start anew, rebuild, and never let my sense of self be compromised again. The day I was discharged from the hospital marked the start of my new life. I went straight home to finalize the severance of my ties to Mark and Marie. With a steady hand, I signed the divorce papers that Mark had prepared earlier. Afterward, I gathered every item that belonged to him and his mother: clothes, personal belongings, the countless shoes, and watches that had filled our space with the excess of their lives. Everything was packed up and delivered to their cramped old apartment in the city. With that chapter closed, I took the next step. I sold the house I had bought with my hard-earned money, the house that was meant to be a home for us but never truly felt like one. Selling it was freeing, not just from the mortgage and the memories, but from the life I was so desperately trying to fit into. 2 months passed, and Mark and Marie were deported back from South Africa, arriving with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a phone in their hands. Their shock was palpable when they found strangers living in their home. The new owners, uninterested in their plight, threatened to call the police if they didn't clear off their property. Marie's voice was shaking with fury when she called me. "Hannah, what the hell is going on? Where are all our things? Why are strangers in our house?" I replied with a calm I hardly felt. "Marie, the house was mine. I paid for it, and it was in my name. I've sold it. All your things are in your old apartment. As for Mark and you, I'm done. We're divorced. I won't be dragged back into your chaos." There was a pause, the kind that told me she was struggling to grasp her new reality. "You can't do this to us, Hannah. We have rights," she insisted. "I've done everything by the book, Marie. You're going to have to accept that. Goodbye." Hanging up the phone felt like shedding a heavy coat in the middle of summer, sudden and immensely relieving. The news eventually came to me through mutual acquaintances that Marie had returned to her job as a hairstylist. Her dreams of blog stardom abandoned alongside her expensive camera equipment. Mark, unable to resume his old job due to his long absence, resorted to driving a taxi. He sold his precious watch collection and wore plain, unbranded clothing. As for me, I moved into a small house on the outskirts of the city. Here, I began rebuilding not just my home but my travel agency as well. The expo was a turning point. People were genuinely interested, and their enthusiasm reignited my own. "Your tours always have that personal touch. How do you do it?" a curious visitor asked, her eyes scanning the brochures. "It's all about understanding what the traveler wants. You listen, adapt, and sometimes take a leap of faith," I explained, the conversation flowing easily. The expo was more than a success, and before long, I was planning expansions, considering even a potential branch in Europe. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I stopped by a small cafe, a little celebration of my progress. As I sipped my coffee, a young couple at the next table was poring over travel brochures, looking utterly confused. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. Are you planning a trip?" I asked, the remnants of my shyness about intruding quickly swept away by my enthusiasm. "Yes, but we're so lost. It's our first big trip together, and we want it to be perfect," the woman said, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and frustration. I smiled, pulling out a business card. "Here, give me a call tomorrow at this number. I'll help you sort it out. Travel's supposed to be fun, not stressful." They thanked me profusely, their smiles wide and genuine. It felt good to be able to help, to use my expertise to make someone's experience better. It reminded me why I loved this job in the first place. Let me introduce myself. I'm Amelia, living in a sprawling house just at the city's edge. I own a pet supplies company and a big retail supermarket focused on pets. Animals? They've been my entire world since I was little. Always found myself caring for some creature or another, which led me to where I am now. It was a cool, crisp evening when James walked into one of my charity events. He was there to write a story, standing awkwardly by the side, holding his notepad like a shield. I walked over, breaking into his space with a smile and a hand stretched out. "Hey, I'm Amelia. Haven't seen you around here before. You new?" He took my hand, a bit surprised, then flashed a quick, somewhat nervous smile. "Yeah, James Mitchell. I'm covering this event for the local paper." "You're Amelia Carter, right? The one who runs all this?" "Guilty as charged," I chuckled, brushing a stray hair from my face. "Hope we're giving you something good to write about." "Oh, definitely." His eyes scanned the room, filled with volunteers and the happy chaos of an event in full swing. "This is impressive, what you've put together." "Thanks. We're all about giving back. Plus, I can't stand seeing animals in trouble. You got pets?" He shook his head. "Travel too much. Wouldn't be fair to the poor thing." We chatted more about the event, and he asked insightful questions that told me he did his homework. His genuine interest was refreshing, and as the night wore on, I found myself looking forward to his calls and texts. Fast forward 6 months, and we're standing under a simple yet elegant arch, exchanging vows. I remember thinking how wild it was that life could throw such good things my way when I least expected it. A year into the marriage, and my business was booming. The house felt even more alive with every stray I brought home. James, ever the intrepid journalist, kept bringing stories of his travels into our conversations, making our dinners lively and full of laughter. One night, I was closing up shop when a lady rushed in, just as I was about to turn the sign to "closed." She was clutching a cardboard box so tightly her knuckles were white. "Excuse me, are you Amelia?" she gasped, out of breath. "Yeah, that's me. What's up?" She thrust the box into my hands. "Found these kittens behind my house. I can't take care of them, but I heard you could help." Peeking into the box, I saw 4 tiny, mewling kittens, their eyes barely open. "I got them, don't worry. They'll be safe here." "Thank you so much." She looked relieved, almost on the verge of tears. I just didn't know what else to do. After she left, I settled the kittens into a warm blanket in the back, ensuring they were comfortable. That night, as I told James about them, he just shook his head in wonder. "You ever gonna say no?" he joked, pouring us both a glass of wine. "Not when it comes to this. You know that." After the wedding, life started spinning faster than I ever imagined. The business was booming, and James's career as a journalist was on the rise. Every piece he wrote seemed to turn to gold, and his trips became more frequent. Despite the hectic pace, the day we found out I was pregnant was the day everything else seemed to pause, just for a moment. The positive test was like a beacon, cutting through the fog of our daily grind. "James, we're going to be parents," I murmured, my heart hammering in my chest as he swept me into his arms. "Yeah, babe, we are," he whispered back, his eyes bright with something like wonder. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness hit me hard, and running the store became a daily challenge. James was supportive, always popping in when he could, bringing me ginger tea and those little crackers that were the only thing I could stomach some days. When Lily was born, it felt like a storm had passed, leaving the world shiny and new. But complications during the delivery cast long shadows. The doctors said I couldn't have more kids, a blunt statement that hung heavy between James and me in the sterile silence of the hospital room. James's disappointment was a quiet thing, but it stretched wide and deep. He tried to hide it, but sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window with a far-off look, or he'd be unusually quiet during dinner. "James, talk to me. Please," I'd plead, reaching for his hand across the table. "I'm fine, Mel, really. Just tired, you know?" But his voice would be flat, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. When Lily turned 1, it was clear she was the light of my life. She had my eyes and James's easy smile. Teaching her to walk, to say her first words, it was a joy unlike any other. But James, he was there but not really. He'd smile and play with her, but his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. Lately, James had started taking more business trips alone and was often late coming home from work. This shift left me with quieter evenings, which I spent nurturing Lily. She was my little ray of sunshine in the increasingly gray days of my marriage. At just 5, she was already reading children's books and even little notes I left around, which I wrote to spark her curiosity and love for learning. Our bond was my solace. As for James and me, our relationship had cooled considerably. He had taken to sleeping in another room, claiming he needed to get up early for work without disturbing me. My attempts at conversation, trying to bridge the widening gap between us, were met with curt responses or tired dismissals. It was past midnight when I was jolted awake by Lily, her small hands shaking me urgently. Her face was lit with a mix of fear and excitement as she tugged at my arm. "Mommy, come quick. There's a baby outside, I couldn't bring him in, he's too heavy," she blurted out, breathless from either the run up the stairs or the weight of her discovery. I was half in a dream, not fully grasping her words. "A baby? Lily, it's probably just your imagination. Let's get you back to bed." But she was insistent, pulling me with more strength than I thought her little hands could muster. "No, Mommy, he's real. I saw him at the front door." Reluctantly, I followed her down the stairs, my mind racing. At the door, there it was, undeniable and shocking. A baby boy, wrapped snugly but abandoned in a portable cradle right on our doorstep. This was a first for me. I'd taken in countless strays, but a child? Lily was peering into the cradle with a curious gaze. "Look, Mommy, it's a boy. He's my brother." I knelt beside the cradle, my heart sinking. "Lily, sweetheart, this isn't our baby. Someone must have left him here by mistake." But Lily was persistent, her small face serious as she said, "No, Mom, there was a note. It said he's Daddy's son, so he's my brother." Before I could respond, James appeared, his face unreadable in the dim porch light. "What's all this?" he asked, his voice tinged with a forced casualness that didn't sit right with me. Lily was quick to answer, "Daddy, it's your baby. The note said so." James let out a stiff, uneasy chuckle. "You must have dreamt that, kiddo. There was no note." Lily's brow furrowed, frustrated. "There was. But now it's gone." James's eyes met mine, something fleeting in his glance that I couldn't place. He turned to Lily, his tone firm, almost harsh. "It's late, Lily. Go to bed now. We'll sort this out." "But Daddy." "Lily, bed. Now," James interrupted, pointing sternly towards the stairs. Lily, crestfallen and muttering, trudged back upstairs. I turned to James, my voice low and urgent. "We need to call the police, James. This is serious. We can't just keep someone's child." He was quick to dismiss me, his whisper sharp. "Let's not overreact. We could take him in, couldn't we? After all, it's a boy, just what we wanted." His words stunned me, the implication chilling. "James, are you listening to yourself? This is a child, not a stray pup that wandered in. We're talking to the police." His face darkened, and he stepped closer. "No police. We're not involving them. I'm going to bed." Once James retreated to his room, I managed to calm the little one. As he slept, I carefully snipped a few locks of his hair, planning to get a DNA test done. This wasn't a decision I took lightly, but my gut told me it was necessary. The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. I watched as James left for work, his demeanor unreadable. Once he was gone, I called the police. They came and took the baby to ensure he was cared for properly. That evening, when James returned and discovered what I had done, he exploded in anger, making a huge scene. "Why would you call them? We could have handled this ourselves," he yelled, his face red with frustration. His reaction only deepened my suspicions. I kept my calm, though, not letting on how much I already suspected. "It's the right thing to do, James. That child could have a family looking for him," I said, trying to reason with him. His responses were evasive, spinning more questions in my mind. I decided then to reach out to a private detective. Meanwhile, I also realized we might need money for all these expenses, lawyers, detectives, who knew what else. So, I checked our joint bank account. My heart sank when I saw it nearly empty. $30,000, saved for Lily's education, gone. I confronted James over the phone. "Where's the money from our account?" "The $30,000? I asked, my voice firm, trying not to let the anger show. "Oh, that. I had to help my brother out, he was in some serious debt," James stammered, his explanation sounding rehearsed. Right then, I knew he was lying. Not wanting to show my hand just yet, I simply replied, "I see." But internally, I was seething. This confirmed my decision to hire the detective. With my personal savings, I took the baby's hair and some from James's comb to a clinic for DNA testing. The process was straightforward, but waiting for the results was agonizing. During that time, I tried to keep things normal at home, especially for Lily's sake, but the atmosphere was tense. 2 weeks later, I received the call from the clinic. The results were as I feared, the child was indeed James's son. I said nothing to James, waiting instead for the detective's report to see the full picture. A week after getting the DNA results, I met with the detective. James had an affair with a woman who then gave birth to his son. They had planned to be a family until she met someone wealthier and decided to abandon the child with James, disrupting her new plans. The detective explained everything in a low, even tone, but each word was a hammer to my heart. "Once she found the other guy, your husband's son became inconvenient. That's why the baby ended up on your doorstep." With the address from the private detective in hand, I drove to the mistress's apartment, a mix of anger and disbelief churning inside me. The whole ride there, I kept thinking about the baby, about James, and about the betrayal that had unfolded so shockingly. When I arrived, I didn't even hesitate at the door. I knocked sharply, my heart pounding in my chest. The door swung open, and there he was, James, looking like he'd seen a ghost. The color drained from his face when he saw me. "What are you doing here, Amelia?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I pushed past him into the apartment, my eyes quickly finding the woman who had turned my life upside down. She was as I imagined, only now wearing a panicked look as she saw me. "I'm not here to cause a scene," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I just want to know one thing. How could you leave a baby, your baby, alone on the street like that?" The mistress, her back stiffening, responded with a shrug that made my skin crawl. "I didn't want the child. James wanted a son, so I left him with you guys to raise." Her nonchalance about the whole thing infuriated me, but before I could reply, the doorbell rang. She looked visibly shaken, moving quickly to answer it. A man entered, confusion written all over his face. "Who are these people, Julia?" he asked, his tone cautious. Julia, the mistress, forced a nervous laugh. "Oh, they're just some friends. They were just leaving." But I couldn't let this go, not now. I stepped forward, meeting the eyes of the man who clearly expected a different kind of evening. "I'm James's wife, and this is our life she's been meddling with. She left her newborn with us because she thought she could get rid of the baby that easily when she found you," I said, the words bitter as they came out. The man, now pale, turned to Julia. "Is this true?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, no lies coming to her aid this time. The man's face hardened as he looked from her to James and then back to me. "I want no part of this," he said, and without another word, he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. James tried to reach for me, his hands outstretched, pleading. "Amelia, please, I can explain. There's nothing you can say that will fix this. I'm filing for divorce." I cut him off, my voice trembling not just with anger, but with a profound sadness. Julia's eyes were on James now. "Don't leave me, not now. We can be a family, with our son," she begged, desperation coloring her every word. The cynicism of her plea, the ease with which she shifted her allegiances, it was all too much. I turned to James, my decision clear. "I can't do this anymore." Without waiting for his response, I left the apartment. My next stop was the police station. I filed a formal complaint against James's mistress for abandoning her child, an act that endangered his safety. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic, but his face was etched with the seriousness of the situation. From there, I went directly to the custody service. I argued fervently that the mistress should be stripped of her maternal rights. The caseworker assigned to the case took notes intently as I spoke. "We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation. It will take time," she explained. "I understand, but please consider the child's safety above all," I urged, the image of the abandoned baby still vivid in my mind. Feeling like I had started a necessary process, I then turned my attention to the impending legal battle with James. I contacted a lawyer, one recommended by my best friend who had gone through her own divorce. The lawyer, Mr. Green, was a stout man with a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately made me feel I was in capable hands. "We'll need a strong strategy, especially if you're seeking financial compensation and custody," Mr. Green said during our first meeting. "I want to ensure my daughter's future is secure, and I want back every penny James took from our joint account," I declared, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Mr. Green nodded, jotting down notes. "The total amount withdrawn was $30,000, I answered. "He used our savings, money that was meant for our daughter's education, for the needs of his mistress. That's a substantial sum. We'll also pursue alimony, given his lack of interest in co-parenting, and compensation for adultery," Mr. Green added, already flipping through his calendar for court dates. The legal proceedings that followed were lengthy and grueling. In court, James and his mistress were defensive, their behavior erratic. The judge frequently reprimanded them for their conduct, which ranged from interruptive outbursts to outright disrespect. On one particularly tense day in court, after James had tried to explain away his actions with feeble excuses, I had my turn to speak. "Your Honor, he not only betrayed our family but also mismanaged our finances, jeopardizing our daughter's future," I stated clearly, meeting the judge's gaze. "I seek full restitution and appropriate alimony to provide for her upbringing." When the final gavel came down, it was a relief. The judge awarded me the full $139,000, citing the clear financial misconduct and James's lack of participation in parenting. He also granted me custody of Lily, with James required to pay alimony. The money, when it finally came through, was immediately set aside for Lily's education. It wasn't just a victory in court, it was a promise to my daughter that I would always fight for her, no matter what. One crisp morning, I sat down with Lily at our kitchen table, her small fingers clumsily spreading jam on her toast. She looked up at me with those big, curious eyes, her brow furrowed in thought. "Mommy, why don't we see Daddy anymore?" she asked, her voice soft and uncertain. I paused, considering how to explain the complexities of adult problems to a child whose world shouldn't have to include such worries. "Well, honey, sometimes people need a little time apart to understand how to be the best they can be," I started, trying to keep my tone light but honest. "It doesn't mean Daddy doesn't love you." Lily nodded, taking this in. "Do you still love Daddy?" The question stung a little, not out of pain for James, but for the innocence Lily still held. "I'll always care about him, because he's your dad. But sometimes love changes, and that's okay." A year after everything came crashing down, life finally seemed to find a rhythm again. Lily and I had settled into our new reality. The store was thriving, and the community around us had rallied in ways I'd never imagined, supporting both our business and our spirits. Then, one sunny afternoon, I received a call that would change the course of our lives once more. It was from the custody service. The news was heavy. My ex-husband's mistress had been stripped of her parental rights, and shockingly, James hadn't stepped in to take his son, despite all his previous claims of wanting a boy to carry on his name. The little boy was placed in an orphanage. My heart broke hearing that. No child should have to go through such abandonment. I talked to Lily about it that evening. "Lily, you remember the little boy we found on our doorstep? Your brother?" I started, unsure how to approach the topic. "Yeah, Mommy. Is he okay?" Her small face was filled with concern. I sighed, gathering my thoughts. He's in an orphanage, sweetheart. His mom can't take care of him, and your dad, he isn't there for him either. Lily looked thoughtful for a moment, then her expression hardened with resolve. Can he come live with us? He's my brother. Her innocence and compassion were overwhelming. Would you like that? I asked, although her mind seemed made up. Yes, I want to help him. He's family, right? Her certainty made up my mind. The next day, I contacted the custody service to inquire about the process of adopting him. The paperwork was daunting, the road filled with legal intricacies, but the thought of that little boy alone in the world propelled me forward. The months that followed were a whirlwind. I visited the orphanage regularly, each time my heart aching at the sight of so many children without families. James's son, Ben, was a quiet, watchful child. Each visit, he grew more accustomed to me. One afternoon, as I was leaving, he tugged at my hand, his small voice calling after me. Mommy, will you come back? His words struck a chord deep within me. Always, Ben. I'll always come back for you. It took 6 months of visits, meetings, and countless signatures before I got the call. The adoption was approved. I was overjoyed and terrified all at once. I rushed to the orphanage to tell Ben the news. When I arrived, he was playing in the yard, his little figure dwarfed by the big toys around him. As I approached, he spotted me and ran over, his small arms lifted in anticipation. I scooped him up, spinning him around. Guess what, Ben? You're coming home with us. You're going to be my son and Lily's brother for real, I told him, my voice thick with emotion. Bringing Ben home felt like mending a piece of my heart I hadn't realized was still broken. Lily embraced her role as big sister with a fierce tenderness that only a child could muster. Watching them together, playing, arguing, and just being siblings, filled the house with a chaotic but joyous energy. Ben started school this year, and watching him head off with his backpack almost as big as he is, it fills me with pride. He's adjusted well, and his teachers all say he's a joy to have in class. Lily, ever the protective big sister, always checks on him during their school breaks, making sure no one picks on him. Running the pet store keeps me busy. It's more than just a job, it's a passion. I've expanded our services, hosting community events, and even starting a small adoption center in the back. Watching families come in and leave with a new pet, knowing they're going to a good home, it's incredibly rewarding. As for James, I haven't seen him since the divorce was finalized. I heard through the grapevine he's moved out of state after losing his job and breaking things off with his mistress. Part of me is curious about how he's managing, but mostly, I don't want any part of that drama anymore. My focus is here, with our children, with our life. The other day, Lily and I were repainting the kitchen, a project we decided to tackle together. Ben was at a friend's house, so it was just us girls, splattering paint and sharing laughs. Mom, do you ever miss things being the way they were before? Lily asked, her brush pausing mid-stroke. I considered her question, paint can in hand. Sometimes, I guess. But I love our life now, don't you? She dipped her brush in the paint. Yeah, it's better now. Ben's here, and we're happy. It's just different, that's all. Different can be good, sweetheart. We've gotten through a lot, and here we are, stronger than ever. I reassured her, giving her a playful nudge with my elbow. Later that week, I had a meeting with the local animal shelter about partnering for an upcoming adoption event. After the meeting, as I was closing up for the day, I took a moment to look around at the life I'd built. From the bustling store filled with customers and their pets, to the community notices pinned up next to the register, to the photos of Lily and Ben at their latest school event. This was my world now, and it was a good one. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the floor of the shop, I locked up and headed home, ready to spend the evening with my kids, maybe watch a movie or play a game. Life had thrown us some curveballs, but here we were, catching every one and throwing them right back. Growing up in our house, it was clear who held the spotlight, Nathan, my older brother by 5 years. He was the golden boy, literally and figuratively. He had the best of everything, the latest clothes, the newest gadgets, while I made do with hand-me-downs and second-hand toys. Nathan was undeniably handsome, a trait that had our parents, especially Mom, beaming with pride. I swear, Nathan could be a model if he didn't have his heart set on business. Mom would gush to her friends over coffee, while I sat in the corner, a book my only company. It wasn't just his looks. Nathan was charming, a social butterfly who could light up any room he walked into. I, on the other hand, was plain, average features, too shy, too awkward. It was like living in the shadow of a celebrity while being invisible at the same time. Even at family gatherings, it was Nathan this, Nathan that. Did you hear about Nathan's latest school project? It's just remarkable. Dad would announce proudly, while I'd quietly help set up the food or clean up the dishes, rarely a part of the conversation unless prompted, and even then, only briefly. The disparity in attention only grew as we got older. When Nathan was accepted into one of the most prestigious colleges in the country, it was as if he had single-handedly secured our family's legacy. The celebration lasted for days. It wasn't until the local news flashed Nathan's face across the screen that things took a turn. Local student accused of multiple frauds, the headline screamed. He had been charming his way into wealthy women's lives, only to scam them out of their savings. The room was silent as the news anchor detailed Nathan's exploits. Dad turned off the TV, his hands shaking. Mom sat down, her face pale. "How could this happen?" she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. I don't understand," Dad muttered. "We gave him everything." I stood in the corner, watching the unraveling. It was the first time I'd seen them doubt their golden boy. The next day, we gathered in the living room, a family meeting that felt more like a crisis summit. Nathan, of course, wasn't there, he was in custody. "Claire," Dad started, his voice heavy. "Your mother and we've been thinking." Mom nodded, taking over with a tremble in her voice. "We were so focused on your brother, we didn't see." "We're so sorry." Their apologies hung in the air, thick and unexpected. I sat, unsure of how to respond. I'd spent years in Nathan's shadow, never quite resenting him, but never feeling enough either. "We want to make it right," Dad said. "We've decided to use some of our savings for your college, Claire. It's your turn now." I was taken aback. College? I'd given up on that dream, figuring I'd find a job and move out as soon as I could. "Really? Are you sure?" "Yes," Mom said firmly. "It's your time to shine." The weeks that followed were a blur. I enrolled in college to study accounting, something solid and reliable, opposite of Nathan's erratic charm. My parents attended my orientation, something they'd never done with Nathan, too confident in his ability to navigate anything. At the orientation, Mom squeezed my hand. "You're going to do great," she said, a little too enthusiastically. I smiled, squeezing back. "Thanks, Mom. I'll try my best." College life was a balancing act. I juggled classes with a part-time job at the campus library, where I shelved books and helped students find resources. One of my coworkers, Jenna, a chatty history major, quickly noticed my reserved nature. "Hey, Claire, you always bolt out of here as soon as your shift ends. Wanna grab coffee sometime?" Jenna asked one evening as we were closing up. "I'd like that," I said, surprised by my own willingness to connect. Maybe it was the normalcy of her invitation, or maybe I was just tired of being alone all the time. During coffee, Jenna talked about her thesis, and I shared a bit about my family, careful to leave Nathan out of it. It was nice, talking to someone who saw me just as me. "You're pretty cool, Claire. Don't let the quiet thing fool anyone," Jenna said with a grin as we left the cafe. Balancing school and work was tough, but fulfilling. I'd study late into the night, sometimes struggling to keep up, especially when group projects came up. I found that I could lead a team well, something I'd never have discovered if not for my new environment. "Alright, team, let's divide up the work based on what parts of the project we're strongest at," I suggested during one group meeting, feeling a bit like a conductor trying to lead an orchestra. You seem to know what you're doing, Claire. I'm glad you're our group leader. One of my classmates, Mark, commented. His words boosted my confidence more than he could know. Each day was a learning curve, filled with small victories and setbacks. I learned not just about accounting, but about who I was beyond my family's expectations, or lack thereof. I learned that I was competent, that I could make friends and influence people, and that I was more than just the quiet girl from a troubled family. As the semesters passed, I continued to excel academically, and eventually, graduation day arrived. Walking across that stage to receive my diploma, I felt a surge of pride. I had done it, on my own terms, without the overshadowing success of my brother. After graduation, I landed a job at a private accounting firm. It was everything I had hoped for, challenging, engaging, and it offered me a sense of independence I had craved for so long. I moved into a small rented apartment, not far from work, and began the adult part of my life with enthusiasm. Every paycheck was a step toward my goal, saving enough for a down payment on my own place. The evening had settled into a quiet routine when my phone rang, slicing through the silence of my small apartment. I glanced at the screen. Mom's name lit up. My heart sank a little. Calls this late were unusual. Mom? What's up? It's late, I said, trying to keep my voice light, but the tremor in hers cut straight through me. Claire, it's your dad. He had a heart attack. He's gone, Claire. He's gone. She stuttered out between sobs, each word heavy and suffocating. I felt the phone slip slightly as my grip loosened in shock. What? How? Mom, are you okay? Where are you? My questions tumbled out, frantic and overlapping. I'm at home. The paramedics, they just left. They couldn't do anything, she cried. I could hear the shattering pain in her voice, the kind that echoes and reverberates through your own soul. When I arrived, the house was eerily silent, the kind of silence that screams in your ears. Mom was sitting in the living room, a crumpled tissue in hand, her eyes lost and red. I rushed to her, kneeling in front of her, taking her hands in mine. Mom, I'm so sorry, I whispered, my own voice breaking as the reality set in. She just nodded, pulling me into a tight hug. He was fine this morning, Claire. We were planning to visit the market this weekend, she murmured into my shoulder, her voice muffled by grief. The days that followed were a whirlwind of funeral arrangements and relatives pouring in to offer their condolences. Did you get a hold of Nathan? I asked one afternoon as we sifted through old photographs of Dad to display at the service. Yes, I did, Mom replied, her voice flat, her hands pausing over a picture of Dad holding a much younger Nathan on his shoulders. He said he was too busy to deal with nonsense. He asked about the inheritance first thing. When I told him everything was in my name, he just hung up. The funeral was a quiet affair. Dad's old friends, our extended family, and neighbors came to pay their respects. The absence of my brother was noted, his empty chair a stark reminder of his chosen detachment. After everyone had left and we were alone again, Mom took to sitting by the window, staring out with a vacant gaze. I tried to engage her, to bring her back from the edge of her grief, but the light in her had dimmed. Mom, you're not alone. I'm here, I reassured her one evening, my hand squeezing hers. She turned to me, her eyes wet with unshed tears. I know, honey. And I'm so grateful for you. I wish things were different. After the funeral, life settled into a new kind of normal. Mom was quieter these days, her smiles fewer and more strained. I tried to fill our home with light, cooking her favorite meals, talking about my day at work, anything to lift her spirits. But often, I caught her staring out the window, lost in her thoughts, the joy that once lit up her eyes, dimmed by sorrow. One evening, as I was clearing up after dinner, I noticed Mom was on the phone in the other room, her voice barely above a whisper. Curiosity piqued, I paused, the clatter of dishes ceasing. No, Nathan, I can't keep doing this. Yes, I know, but... Her voice trailed off into the quiet hum of the living room. She never mentioned she was in touch with Nathan, and alarm bells rang in my head. When she came back into the kitchen, her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she sat down at the table. "Mom, what's going on? Who was that on the phone?" I asked, sitting across from her, my tone more stern than I intended. She sighed, a deep, weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "It was Nathan," she admitted, avoiding my gaze. "He's been calling more often, asking for money." "Money?" I repeated, anger starting to bubble inside me. "Why are you giving him money? Especially after he didn't even bother to come to Dad's funeral." Mom wrung her hands, her eyes moist as she looked up at me. I know it's wrong, but he's still my son, Claire. He says he's in trouble, that he needs it to get back on his feet." I stood up, pacing back and forth as I tried to process her words. "Mom, he's using you. You can't let him do this, especially not now. He didn't even care enough to show up when Dad died." She nodded, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I just thought, maybe if I helped him, he'd come around. See what he's missing, see that we still love him." I stopped pacing, kneeling beside her chair, taking her hands in mine. "Mom, I love you, and I know you love Nathan. But you can't set yourself on fire to keep him warm. He's an adult. He made his choices. You need to think about your future now, about what's left for you." The next day, when Nathan called again, I was with Mom, standing by her side for moral support. She put him on speaker, and her voice was firmer this time, more resolute. "Nathan, I can't send you money anymore. You need to find another way to sort out whatever mess you're in," she declared, a slight tremor in her voice but her resolve clear. There was a pause, and he scoffed, and I could almost see his sneer, through the phone. "Fine. Don't come crawling back to me when you need something." The line went dead, and the silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of severed ties. Mom sighed, a mix of relief and sorrow in her exhale. "Did I do the right thing, Claire?" I squeezed her hand, reassuring her with a nod. "You did, Mom. It's time we both started healing." From that day on, Mom stopped sending money. It was a tough decision, one that left its own scars, but it was necessary. Nathan had made his choice, and we had made ours, to move forward, no longer at the mercy of his demands. It was early morning when I got the call that changed everything again. The sharp ringtone pierced through the silence of my apartment, a harsh reminder that life was still full of unexpected turns. "Claire," Aunt Linda's voice came through the phone, sounding strained and urgent. "You need to come to the hospital right away. It's your mom." Dropping everything, I rushed to the hospital, my heart pounding with fear and my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The corridors seemed longer than usual, echoing with the sounds of my hurried steps. When I finally reached her room, Aunt Linda was waiting outside, her eyes red-rimmed. "What happened? Is she okay?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. Aunt Linda shook her head, her voice breaking as she spoke. "It was a heart attack, Claire. She didn't make it." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I leaned against the wall for support. My mom, the constant in my life despite everything, was gone. Tears welled up in my eyes, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. "I'm so sorry, Claire." She went peacefully in her sleep, Aunt Linda said, pulling me into a hug. We stood there, holding each other, sharing our grief. After a few moments, we stepped into the room to see her. Mom looked peaceful, as if she were just sleeping. I approached the bedside, taking her cool hand in mine. "Mom, I hope you're at peace now," I whispered, my tears dropping onto the white hospital sheets. "I'm going to miss you so much." Aunt Linda placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "She loved you, Claire. She was so proud of the woman you'd become." Leaving the hospital, the task of planning another funeral loomed over me. Mom deserved a beautiful send-off, something dignified and full of love, just like she was. I took it upon myself to organize everything, wanting to ensure it reflected the warmth she always brought into our lives. During the preparations, I called Nathan, feeling it was only right he knew, even if he hadn't been there for her at the end. "Nathan, it's Claire. Mom's passed away. "We're organizing the funeral for this Friday," I said, my voice void of the anger I once felt towards him. There was a pause, and then he replied, his voice devoid of any real emotion. "I see. I won't make it. Just handle whatever needs to be done." Life after Mom's funeral felt strangely quiet. The house was filled with echoes of a past that felt both close and distant, a reminder of everything that had transpired. Just as I was beginning to find my rhythm in the silence, it was shattered by an unexpected and unwelcome return. It was a cloudy Thursday afternoon when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Peeking through the curtains, my heart sank. There stood Nathan, stepping out of an expensive-looking car, with a woman I assumed was his wife, based on her familiar face from some of the pictures he used to share online. Her appearance was bold, almost too bold, with bright red lipstick and heavy makeup that made her look out of place against the backdrop of our modest family home. They didn't bother with the courtesy of a phone call or even a knock. Nathan marched up to the door, his face still handsome, but etched with the hard lines of a life recklessly lived. He didn't wait for an invitation, pushing the door open and striding in with an air of entitlement. "Claire, long time no see," Nathan said, his voice dripping with a familiarity that we no longer shared. He pushed past me without waiting for an invitation, his wife following closely behind. "What are you doing here, Nathan?" I managed to say, my voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "We're here to stay, obviously." "Heard you've been living it up in Mom's house all by yourself," Nathan replied, throwing his jacket on the couch as if he owned the place. His wife smirked, scanning the room like she was appraising the property. "Nice place. We'll take good care of it, don't worry." I felt a flash of anger. "This is still Mom's house, and you can't just come back and claim it like nothing happened. You didn't even come to her funeral, Nathan. You have no right to be here." Nathan laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty room. "Oh, come on, Claire. We're family. And as the only son, don't you think I deserve a piece of the pie? Well, we're here now, and we're staying. Get used to it, or get out." I was shaking, my hands balled into fists at my sides. "This is not happening. You will leave. This is my home." Nathan laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "We'll be back with our things in 3 days. Make sure you're gone by then." As they turned and left, the door slamming shut behind them, the finality of the threat hung heavy in the air. I was alone, the echoes of their laughter and threats bouncing off the walls of the home I had come to cherish as my sanctuary. Furious and shaken, I dialed Aunt Linda immediately. She answered on the second ring, her voice a comfort as always. "Aunt Linda, Nathan just showed up. He's trying to kick me out of the house. He said he and his wife are moving in," I managed to say, my voice tight with emotion. "Oh, Claire, that boy has gone too far this time," Aunt Linda replied, her tone hardening with each word. "Don't you worry. I'm going to come over. We'll sort this out together. Nathan needs to be put in his place, and I'm just the one to do it." After we hung up, I paced through the house, each room filled with memories of my parents, of a happier, simpler time. I wasn't going to let Nathan destroy what little peace I had managed to find in the aftermath of our parents' deaths. With Aunt Linda on my side, I felt a flicker of hope. Together, we would face whatever came next. 3 days had never passed so slowly. As the sun rose on the third day, the tension in the air was palpable. Aunt Linda arrived early, carrying not only her purse but also an air of resolve that was both comforting and intimidating. "Morning, Claire," she greeted me as she stepped into the kitchen, where I was nervously sipping my coffee. "Ready for this?" I nodded, setting my mug down with a clatter. "As ready as I'll ever be, I guess." "Thanks for being here, Aunt Linda." "Wouldn't be anywhere else," she assured me, her voice firm. "Now, let's go over what we'll say when they get here." We didn't have long to wait. Before long, the sound of a car engine broke the quiet morning. Through the window, I saw Nathan and his wife pull into the driveway. My heart started pounding, but Aunt Linda's calm demeanor helped steady me. They didn't bother knocking. Nathan opened the door and strode in as if he owned the place, his wife trailing behind him, her smirk more pronounced than ever. "Claire, get out. We're here to take what's rightfully ours," he barked, his wife nodding in agreement behind him. Aunt Linda stepped forward from where she had been standing just out of sight. "Nathan, you should be ashamed. After all your sister and your late mother have been through, you show up now, making demands?" Nathan sneered. "Save it, Aunt Linda. We know there's no will. Claire, move out. This place is ours now." That's when Aunt Linda, with a calmness that belied the tension in the air, waved an envelope in front of Nathan. "Actually, your mother did leave a will. And I, as her appointed executor, have it right here." Nathan's eyes widened as Aunt Linda held out the envelope. In a swift move, he grabbed it, tearing it to pieces. His wife laughed, a sound that echoed off the walls mockingly. "There, no will, no proof. This house is ours now," Nathan declared triumphantly. Aunt Linda just chuckled, the sound making Nathan's smile falter. "You think that was the original?" "Oh, Nathan, that was just a copy. The real will is safe with the notary." She reached into her bag and pulled out another document, unfolding it with deliberate slowness. "Here's what your mother really wanted," Aunt Linda said, her voice steady and clear. She began to read aloud. "To my daughter, Claire, I leave the family home and a sum of $150,000, for she has shown the strength and compassion of character that represents our family's legacy. To my son, Nathan, I leave our family Bible, in the hopes that he will find guidance to overcome his vices and find a path to redemption." The words hung heavy in the air. Nathan's face went from red to pale, his earlier confidence deflating like a punctured balloon. "This isn't fair. You can't do this to me. I deserve half of that money, Claire," Nathan shouted, his voice echoing with desperation. "You deserve what Mom decided to give you," I replied, my voice firm despite the shaking of my hands. "And if you don't leave now, I will call the police." Nathan looked at his wife, then back at Aunt Linda and me. His wife pulled at his arm, muttering something under her breath. After a moment that stretched out painfully, they turned and stalked back to their car. The morning after Nathan left for good, I stood in the quiet of the house, the early light casting gentle patterns across the floor. The house felt different today, like a weight had been lifted, a place just for me now, full of potential and promise for the future. I made my way to the kitchen, where Aunt Linda was already making coffee. The aroma filled the space, comforting and familiar. "Morning, Claire. How'd you sleep?" Aunt Linda asked, handing me a mug. "Better than I have in weeks," I admitted, taking a cautious sip. "It feels like I can finally breathe again." She smiled, pulling out a chair at the table. "It's your fresh start, right here. What are you planning to do first?" I joined her at the table, my mind buzzing with ideas. "I think I'm going to start by redecorating a bit. Make this place more me. And then, I might even start looking into what it takes to start my own accounting firm. It's been a dream for a while." "That sounds wonderful, Claire," Aunt Linda said, her eyes twinkling with pride. "You've got such a good head on your shoulders. I've no doubt you'll make it happen." Later that day, I walked through each room, imagining the changes I'd make. In the midst of my planning, the doorbell rang. At the door stood my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. "Claire, dear, I heard about your mother. I'm so sorry for your loss. And I heard your brother was trying to cause some trouble," she added, a hint of concern in her tone. I nodded, not wanting to spread the family drama too far. "Yes, but it's settled now. I'm just looking forward to some peace. Well, if you need help with anything, my son is always around. He's good with repairs, and he's cheap too," she offered with a chuckle. "Thanks, I might take you up on that. I'm planning some changes around here," I said, grateful for her support. The next few weeks were a flurry of activity. Painting, moving furniture, and even a few repairs courtesy of Mrs. Thompson's son, who turned out to be as handy as promised. Each brushstroke and each new piece of decor transformed the house into a reflection of my personality, something I had longed for without even realizing. One evening, sitting in my newly arranged living room, the changes weren't just physical. I felt changed too, more confident, more grounded. The house no longer felt like a battleground of family conflicts, but a sanctuary of my aspirations.